The disappearance of the Flannan lighthouse keepers. Well, December 15th, 1900. The relief vessel Hesperus crests a towering wave and noses into the gray maw of the North Atlantic. Ahead, jagged black cliffs rise from frothing seas. Alien Moor, the largest of the Flannan Isles. Salt spray sears the lungs. A gale moans through shrouded rigging. On deck, Captain Robertson squints through sheets of rain. His orders are simple. Check on the 3 keepers, replenish stores, and be gone before the next storm. Yet the islands have their own plans. They lower the yawl into the churning swell. Deckhands' voices vanish in the wind. Each oar stroke feels like carving through ice. When at last they slip into a sheltered cove below the lighthouse, the Hesperus hammers away, powerless to help. Wet boots crunch on slippery rock as Robertson leads his men up the narrow path. The massive oak door stands ajar. A bronze ring, glazed with salt, sways like a pendulum. The captain pauses, heart pounding, noticing the uncanny silence. No gulls wheel above the beacon. No footsteps of wind-worn keepers patter on creaking floorboards. He pushes the door inward. Inside, the lightkeeper's quarters are unnervingly pristine. A chipped enamel mug sits on the low table. Steam long gone. A pan of potatoes rests on the stove, skin split but untouched. Kerosene lamps glow dimly, as if someone had just whispered them to life. On a rough-hewn writing desk, a half-finished letter lies atop a neat stack of logs. In blunt, hurried handwriting. Storm intensifies. We must... The sentence cuts off midway. Rain drums on small-paned windows. The only sound is wind shrieking through the lichen-cracked mortar. Robertson calls out. His voice trembles. Moore? Marshall? MacArthur? No answer. They fan out through the rooms. In the bunk room, cushions lie fluffed and neatly tucked. Beds never slept in. In the lamp room, 3 oilskins hang by the bench, still dripped with sea spray. On the stair landing, a single leather boot lies on its side. Its mate is nowhere to be found. Deeper in the lighthouse, the logbook rests open on a slanted desk. Last entry, signed Joseph Moore, reads, 14th December, 11 p.m. Sea calm, watch unchanged. Lights steady. Below it, a jagged blotch of ink, no name. No date, only a smear. Outside, the gale ratchets tighter. Waves slam the cliffs in thunderous applause. The swell lifts the windows. Water trickles down walls like ghostly fingers. Something about the neatness of it all chills Robertson to the bone. The keepers should have barricaded themselves. They should have left footprints across the peat floor. Instead, no sign of struggle. No sign of life. A sudden crash echoes from above. Robertson and 2 men sprint up the spiral stairs to the lantern room. A pane of glass is shattered. Jagged shards litter the floor. The lamp stands overturned, its flame guttering. Beyond the broken window, a wall of spray blinds their eyes. Then they see it, a colossal swell barreling in, its crest knotted with green and white. It bears down on the lighthouse as if drawn by malice. Back! Back! Robertson howls, but the wind carries his voice away. He grabs a letter from the desk, scanning its blank second page. His blood runs cold. At the bottom, in a hand not Moore's, scrawled so faintly, it might be a trick of the light. They come from beneath. A shriek of wind almost obscures the sound. Footsteps, not theirs, clattering on the metal walk outside. 3 heavy treads, pacing around the lantern. Robertson yanks open the door. The wind surges in, ripping his coat back. He stumbles onto the narrow ledge. For a heartbeat, he thinks he spots movement, a shape hunched in the breaker's foam. Lightning cracks open the sky. The figure straightens. It's tall, too tall, limbs long and skeletal. Then, in an instant, the wave consumes it. The lantern room shudders. Robertson slams the door shut and braces his shoulder against the oak. The next impact rattles every pane. He stares at the letter, now stained with seawater. By dawn, the storm has spent itself. The Hesperus returns, ropes creaking against the mast. Robertson's crew rows ashore to reclaim the yawl. Empty. No bodies, no trace of the keepers. Only the overturned lamp, the single boot, and the unfinished letter, trembling in the morning light. They burn what remains to drive out the chill, yet no fire can banish the lingering dread. Back on deck, Robertson holds the letter out to the sea. The wind snatches it away, tearing it into scraps that drift like specters across the water. He watches them vanish into mist. To this day, mariners crossing the Flannan Isles speak of a pale beacon rotating in the storm. Though the lenses are gone, they tell of hushed whispers carried on roaring gales, and some claim that when the wind dies, you can still hear three voices beyond the wall, murmuring a warning not to come any closer. The vanishing of the Sodder children. The night air in Fayetteville sits cold and still, the hush of winter pressing in as the Sodder family gathers around their crackling hearth. Inside, evergreen boughs scent the parlor. Stockings hang from the mantel, stitched with each child's name. Jenny Sodder watches her husband, George, adjust the strings of Christmas lights, their warm glow dancing on her children's eager faces. Outside, a biting wind rattles the eaves, an ill omen she cannot yet name. By midnight, the house will be nothing but ash. By dawn, 5 of their children will vanish without trace. And for 20 lonely Christmases thereafter, Jenny will wake with the same ache. The empty chairs, the silent rooms, the unanswered question that claws at her heart. For years, George and Jenny refused to accept the grim verdict of local authorities that their children perished in the flames of a Christmas Eve fire. No bodies were ever recovered from the rubble, only charred timbers and the lingering scent of smoke. Instead, the Sodders held fast to their conviction that someone, somewhere, had spirited the 5 away. They pored over every scrap of evidence, burns on the front porch that suggested someone fled through a rear door, eyewitness accounts of a lone, unmarked car speeding down Route 16 just before dawn, strange phone calls in the dead of night, lines crackling with what sounded like children's laughter, then abrupt silence. Neighbors whispered that Jenny's grief had blossomed into obsession. But she carried on, stapling, "Have you seen us?" posters to telephone poles, interrupting holiday dinners to ask visiting lawmen, "Are you certain there were no remains?" George, exhausted but steadfast, began renting billboards along 2-lane highways, their faces emblazoned in black and white. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Bobby, frozen at ages they would never outgrow. Through it all, the memory of that sleepless Christmas Eve remained vivid. How the family had gone to bed after tucking in the youngest, only to be awoken by the smell of smoke. How George had smashed through a boarded-up window to rescue Jenny. How they searched the backyard through choking haze, but never found their children's voices calling them home. It was nearly Christmas of 1953, 8 years since the fire, when Jenny found the envelope on her porch, tucked beneath a broken icicle. The creamy paper was thick and heavy with age, the flap sealed without a stamp. No return address. She broke the seal with trembling fingers. Inside lay a single slip of stationery bearing 5 simple words, penned in an angular, unfamiliar hand. 5 are alive. 194. Widow Sodder. Beneath the message, pressed between the pages, was half of a faded photograph. The right side cut cleanly away. The remaining half showed a lanky teenager in a dark coat standing before a roadside sign marked Route 194. The smile on his lips was unmistakable, Maurice's grin. But the handwriting on the back was not his. Jenny's breath caught. She turned the photograph over again and again, hoping the missing half would reveal itself on the floorboards. Only the note remained. The number 194 echoed in her mind, a cryptic clue pointing somewhere out there, beyond every map she'd ever studied. At dawn, George and Jenny drove the winding stretch of Route 194, hearts pounding with equal parts dread and hope. They passed lonely crossroads and shuttered diners, each mile a reminder of how far they'd come and how little they truly knew. No flaring lights, no familiar laughter. Only the cold wind that rattled their car windows as if mocking their quest. Back at the old homestead, they pinned the half photograph to the bulletin board, leaving space for the vanished half. Jenny stared at it long after George had gone to bed, until the lamplight flickered out and the parlor was cast in deep shadow. Sometimes, just before sleep, she thought she heard a faint tap at the front door, a soft shuffle on the porch, tiny footsteps echoing against the wood. Her heart would leap. But when she threw open the door, there was nothing but snow drifting over the threshold. And so the Sodder house remains half lit by Christmas hope and half shrouded in mystery. The note, 5 are alive. 194- lingers on the mantel, a promise with no end. Jenny, stubborn as the mountain winter, keeps it there, certain that one day someone will bring her the other half of that photograph. And with it, the final piece of her family's shattered Christmas. The disappearance of pilot Frederick Valentich. October 21st, 1978. The sun dips low over Cape Otway, casting the airstrip in a molten glow. Cessna 182 LN2466D idles at the end of runway 15, its engine's steady hum vibrating through the asphalt. Pilot Frederick Valentich, 30 years old and freshly certified on single-engine traffic, runs a final checklist by flashlight. Fuel pumps on, mixture rich, magnetos both. He breathes in the tang of avgas. Behind him, the rolling green hills give way to the brooding expanse of Bass Strait, its waters infamous for sudden squalls and hidden shoals. At 6:14 p.m., Valentich calls Melbourne, Flight Service Unit. Valentich, clear, professional. Melbourne, November 2. Sierra Delta, request transit clearance over Bass Strait to King Island. ATC, calm. 2 Sierra Delta, squawk 1072, maintain VFR altitude of 4,500 feet. He acknowledges, and the propeller's rhythm fades into the radio's hiss. Night will fall in minutes, but visibility remains excellent. The offshore breeze is cool against his jacket. Frederick taxis into the darkness, the runway lights retreating beneath his wings. At 6:17 p.m., he's airborne, climbing through 3,000 feet. King Island, his destination, is little more than a speck on the approach plates, a routine hop in Australian general aviation. He tunes the transceiver to 123.6 megahertz and confirms with ATC Valentich. Flight level 3000, inbound King Island. ATC. Roger, 2 Sierra Delta. 10 minutes pass like any other flight. The altimeter's steady oscillation, the soft whir of the fuel gauge, the dull glow of the instrument panel. Then, at 6:25 p.m., the radio crackles anomalously, a metallic tang layering over the static. He leans forward. Outside, through the plexiglass canopy, 4 lights glimmer at his 12 o'clock dead ahead. They hover at 4,500 feet, unmoving against the sky. Valentich, uneasy. Melbourne, do you show any traffic above me? ATC typing. Stand by 2 Sierra Delta. Silence stretches. Valentich's heartbeat drums in his ears louder than the engine. The lights begin to move, slowly at first, then accelerating in perfect formation, maintaining a level flight that no conventional craft could replicate. He flips the landing light on, then off, twice. The lights mimic him. Valentich, voice quickening. It's moving at great speed now, Melbourne. Something strange. Green and amber lights. The underside looks metallic. ATC, calm. Can you identify type? Valentich, negative. It's not an aircraft. He checks his gauges. Oil pressure steady, engine smooth. Yet outside, the lights draw closer until they block the moon, casting the cockpit in sudden shadow. The propeller's note deepens as if choking. Valentich, voice tight. It's hovering over me again at about 2,000 feet above. It's rotating. The thing seems to be playing some sort of game. ATC. Can you maintain separation? Valentich. I'm trying to, Melbourne. A high-pitched whine floods the cabin. Valentich grips the yoke. His sweat-slick palms slide. Through the canopy, the lights pulse in a crystalline pattern like eyed specters watching his every move. At 6:27 p.m., everything changes. The lights vanish. His transponder loses lock. Instruments flicker. For a heartbeat, the night is pitch black. The engine stutters once, twice, then roars back to life. Valentich exhales, relief flooding him, until the lights flare again. Closer now, pinned against the fuselage. Valentich, voice breaking. Melbourne, the object is close enough to cast a shadow on the water below. I can see its hull, polished, seamless. They're watching me. His words trail off into a burst of static, a crack like shattering glass. The engine note warps, as if drawn into a vacuum. Then, silence. Before dawn, HMAS Canberra and several civilian vessels comb the strait. Divers scour the seabed with sonar. Trawl nets drag the depths, but no wreckage surfaces. No fragment of metal, no piece of propeller. No trace of Frederick Valentich or his Cessna. All that remains is a grainy cassette of his final transmission, preserved at Melbourne's Flight Service Unit. Engineers have played it back in slow motion, revealing the panicked edge in his voice, the ghostly echo of something unknown scratching against the radio's frequency. Some swear they hear faint whispers beneath the static, too low to be his, too deliberate to be electrical noise. In the years since, Valentich's disappearance has become legend. Local fishermen claim their sonar picked up enormous moving shapes deep below the strait. Pilots report fleeting radar blips in the same corridor. And in the station's dusty archives, his file sits open, page marked at 6:27 p.m., the moment when the watchers closed in. Tonight, when the wind off Bass Strait howls through Cape Otway's trees, some say you can still hear a distant engine struggling against invisible gears. And if you switch your radio to 123.6 megahertz, just as the sun dips below the horizon, you might catch a final whisper over the static. They're watching me. Echoes of the midnight call. The old farmhouse stood alone at the edge of Ravenswood Hollow, its weather-worn clapboards silvered by the pale sliver of a harvest moon. Once it had been lively, a place where children's laughter drifted through open windows, and the scent of fresh bread rose with the morning sun. Now, it sagged under the weight of decades, its shutters crooked, its porch beams groaning like tired bones. Autumn's chill seeped through every crack, carrying the musk of rotting leaves and the faint tingle of something unseen. I lay awake in my narrow bed, the hum of the radiator a distant heartbeat. Outside, the wind whispered through the eaves, and an owl called once, then fell silent. It was almost 2 a.m., that witching hour when memories bleed into dreams, and the mind conjures horrors best left unimagined. That's when the phone rang. At first, I believed it to be a prank, an errant text-to-voice glitch. My thumb hovered over decline as the screen flashed, unknown caller, its pale digits mocking me in the dark. I hesitated, curiosity rattling through my veins like ice.
Hello?
I ventured, voice brittle. Only static answered, a low hiss that crackled through the handset. Then a soft rasp.
I'm home.
The line went dead. Silence swelled, so heavy I could almost taste it. My heart thundered against my ribs as if it tried to escape. I fought the urge to bolt for the front door, to slam every lock and dial the police. Instead, I pressed the receiver to my ear, breathing shallow, straining for any sound. The only reply was the distant creak of settling timber. Minutes or hours passed. Then the phone rang again. This time, I didn't hesitate.
Who is this?
My voice trembled.
My name is yours.
Gooseflesh rippled down my arms. The speaker's tone was unmistakably my own, only slower, warped, as though echoing from some cruel mirror. It repeated my full name, syllable by deliberate syllable, savoring each one like a delicacy. I sank to the floor, my back against the cold plaster wall. The lampshade trembled as the radiator rattled. Somewhere in the hallway, floorboards groaned under invisible weight. A faint draft brushed past me. No door or window was open?
Where are you?
I croaked.
Behind you.
I whirled around. Darkness. The oak's shadow outside twisted across the curtain like a skeletal hand. My breath came in stutters. My fingers trembled as I dialed 911, but instead of the dial tone, I heard only garbled static. Then laughter, soft, triumphant, and utterly inhuman. Panic seized me. I bolted for the living room, knocking over a leaf green side table. A porcelain lamp crashed, its shade bursting into shards that glittered like shattered stars. My foot caught on the oriental rug's frayed edge. I fell, my forehead meeting the floor with a sharp crack. Pain bloomed behind my eyes. The phone, still clutched in my numb fingers, rang once more. I blinked through the throbbing ache and forced myself upright. The display read, "Incoming call." No number, just a pulsing icon. Then the caller ID flickered, turned into a photograph. Me, asleep. Taken just hours ago while I lay wide-eyed in that very bed. My blood ran cold. In the window, moonlight shifted. The oak's branches scratched the glass in a deliberate rhythm. 3 sharp taps, as though sending a Morse code from beyond. The phone buzzed against my palm. Fear clawed at my throat. I answered on impulse.
I'm home.
This time, the voice on the line was ragged, drenched in wind and metal-on-metal screeching, layered with distant screams.
Open the door.
It murmured, each word a ragged breath.
Let me in.
My hand froze over the deadbolt. If I unlocked it, I would welcome this nightmare into my life. If I didn't, the voice would find another way. The bolt clicked, a sound like a funeral gong. The front door swung wide without a creak. A blast of frigid air snuffed out the lamps, plunging me into absolute black. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might shatter my ribs. From the hallway came a soft sigh.
I'm home.
I stumbled back, every nerve ablaze. Footsteps, countless invisible feet creaked closer. I punched the light switch, but only flickering sparks appeared. And then I saw it. In the wall's antique mirror, my reflection. But wrong. Pallid skin stretched over hollow eyes, and a grin split those lips. A grin that was not mine. It tilted its head, watching me with hungry mockery. My own mouth opened with a silent scream. The mirror cracked, racing spiderweb fractures across its surface as a new voice hissed through the shards.
We belong here, together.
By dawn, the county sheriff arrived. He found the front door ajar, curtains tangled in wind, and the farmhouse in eerie stillness. On the floor lay my broken phone, its screen dark. Dust and ash formed a single message, scrawled in what looked like wet wax across the fractured mirror. Always answer the call. They searched every room, but there was no sign of me. The neighbors whispered. Some swore they saw 2 figures in the upstairs window. One living, one other. Others claimed that at midnight the walls themselves whisper your name. I am told that I roam Ravenswood Hollow now, a call waiting in the wires. When the line rings, a familiar voice beckons.
I'm home.
And if you answer, you join the echo, another visitor trapped behind the glass, whispering in the dark. So remember, on those restless nights, the most disturbing call is the one you never hang up on. The whispering pulse. Autumn wind scoured the faded bricks of the Calhoun Manor. The air smelled of damp leaves and old paper. An archivist's promise come true, Iris Caldwell thought, stepping through the wrought iron gate. The late Victorian mansion rose above her like a silent sentinel, its turrets and gables wrapped in trailing ivy. Candlelight from inside cast long, quivering shadows against lead-pane windows. Tonight, she would catalog dusty ledgers and yellowed letters left untouched for a century. She did not expect to catalog her own heartbeat instead. Iris set her duffel on the polished oak floor. It rang hollow beneath her footfall, an echo through corridors paneled in dark mahogany. She unpacked her tools, laptop, voice recorder, a battered flashlight. Outside, the moon was pale, half hidden by drifting clouds. She moved methodically, recording the names of long-dead occupants. Algernon Calhoun, a marble-jawed industrialist. His spinster sister Lenora, whose obituary whispered ruin and madness. At midnight, the first thump shook the floorboards. Thump, thump, irregular, like a faltering heartbeat. Iris paused, breath caught in her throat. She pictured city traffic, a distant train, anything to keep her calm. But the sound persisted, muffled, coming from the parlor beneath her feet. She knelt, palm flat on the polished wood. Beneath its gloss, she traced a faint seam, an almost invisible hatch. The boards were secured by tiny iron nails, but one corner gave under her pressure. A breath of stale air hissed upward, carrying the faint aroma of machine oil and rust. As she pried the panel, a low, pulsing rhythm swelled. Thump, 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 thump. It rolled through the dark cavity like a distant drum. Her heart ratcheted in time. Iris illuminated the gap. There, on a dusty platform, sat a small gramophone, its brass horn bent, its finish tarnished to a dull green. A record spun slowly on its turntable, though no mechanical connection was visible. The vinyl had no label, only a rough spiral of scratched grooves. She lifted the needle. The pulse roared into her ears, a living throb that seemed too deep for any machine. Each rotation coaxed new echoes from the walls. She nearly dropped her flashlight when a soft voice whispered from the horn, "Help me." It was neither male nor female. Something between breath and wind. It called to her. Shadows danced on the ceiling as she circled the platform. The flashlight beam caught motes of dust, drifting like ghosts. The smell of old leather and damp cedar overwhelmed her senses. Slowly, she lifted the horn to her ear. Her own pulse thundered back at her, amplified, magnified, impossible. Her vision swam. Determined, Iris yanked the gramophone free and carried it into the hallway. The thumping followed her, a chase in her skull. She hurled the device against a stone mantel. It shattered. Horn fragments spun off, but the pulse remained resonating through each shard. She raced down a narrow stairway to the cellar, hands slick with sweat. At the far end, cobweb-strung beams gave way to a trapdoor. Below, a dank air pocket held the same rhythmic beating. Her knees buckled as she pried it open. In the flicker of her flashlight, she saw it. A small crypt carved into the bedrock. Within lay a lacquered casket, its surface carved with swirling vines and unfamiliar runes. The lid was ajar. Inside, wrapped in decayed linen, lay the contorted remains of a man. Across his chest was bound a brass cage. At its center, a small mechanical heart. It pulsed. Its beat was her own.
Alice.
A rasping voice breathed Julian Hale's name, scratched in the wood. Iris stumbled back as the casket convulsed. The mechanical heart clicked faster, rattling its cage. A final, ragged gasp issued from the corpse. The heartbeat cut abruptly. Silence. Dawn found Iris on the gravel drive, rain-damp hair plastered to her face. She wore a threadbare coat borrowed from the mudroom. The manor loomed behind her, windows dark and empty. In her pocket, she discovered the unbroken record fragment. One half circle of vinyl, its grooves faintly throbbing. She climbed into her car and turned the ignition. For a moment, she thought she saw movement in the rearview mirror. A pale hand pressed against the parlor window. Then the road swallowed her. That evening, in her city apartment, the fragment lay on her kitchen table. She dared not touch it, but sometimes when the lights flicker, she hears it. Thump, thump, thump. A whisper follows.
Stay with me.
Scurrying shadows. Victor Langley pulled his coat tighter against the autumn chill as he crossed the threshold of the Colden estate. Fog coiled around the wrought iron gates, muting the distant cry of owls. He'd come to spend a solitary weekend in his family's ancestral mansion, an imposing stone behemoth abandoned 2 centuries ago after his great-great-grandfather's infamous crime. Locals still whispered of the Tennant family butchered in the dead of night and of the rats that swarmed the manor floors in the aftermath. Tonight, Victor intended only to edit his latest monograph on colonial justice. He did not expect to become part of the next chapter. The grand entry hall yawned before him, draped in cobwebs and cloaked in shadow. Oil lamps flickered against paneled walls, throwing grotesque shapes that danced like marionettes. Victor set down his leather satchel, its brass buckle glowing faintly. From somewhere above, a cat's low hiss split the silence. Black as spilled ink, Obscura stalked into view, her fur bristling, eyes 2 glinting coals fixed on a distant wall. At midnight, a soft scratching began. Scritch, scratch, behind the east wing paneling. Victor paused over his notes. He told himself it was just old wood settling, or perhaps a few mice seeking refuge. Yet Obscura's hackles rose, and her claws scraped frantically at the baseboard. Their eyes met in the dim light, a silent pact of understanding. Something moved within the walls. Come morning, Victor discovered half a dozen spring traps lined neatly along the kitchen skirting. Each held a bait of cheese, yet not one trap had sprung. Instead, a fine dust lay undisturbed on the floor around them. An untouched circle of silence. His pulse quickened as he remembered the brittle pamphlet he'd found in the study, The Rat King of Colden. The local folklore spoke of hidden catacombs where rats bred in impossible numbers. Protectors of a family's darkest secret. That night, the scratching returned, urgent, desperate. Obscura darted ahead, leading Victor through a labyrinth of corridors to a faded tapestry in the library. With trembling fingers, he peeled it back, revealing a warped hatch set into the floorboards. A putrid draft seeped upward as Victor pried it open, and below lay the first step into dank darkness. Lantern in hand, Victor descended into the bowels of the earth. Each step squelched on moss-slick stone. The air reeked of decay. Ancient graffiti scarred the tunnel walls. Pleas for mercy, names gouged in despair. At its end, the beam fell upon a vast chamber, a writhing mass of red eyes and bristling fur. Thousands of rats, their teeth bared, pressed against the beam of light, claws clicking like bone on bone. Victor stumbled back as the creatures surged, but they halted, forming a corridor for a single skeletal figure that emerged, part rat, part man. Its limbs unnaturally elongated. Its voice was a rasp of rusted metal.
You bear his blood.
The word blood echoed in Victor's skull as he recognized the crest embroidered on his satchel. his great-great-grandfather's seal. The creature's hollow eyes bored into him.
The debt remains unpaid.
Fear seized Victor, and he fled up the stairs with rats thundering behind him. He hauled the hatch closed just as claws rattled against its underside. Silence returned, broken only by his ragged breathing. At dawn, villagers found the manor gates ajar. Inside, there was no sign of Victor, only his lantern guttering beside a single snapped spring trap. Obscura sat on the foyer's flagstones, her gaze fixed on the dim hallway. Against the hearth's cold stone lay the tapestry, now face down. On its reverse, fresh scratch marks spelled out 2 words: "We're hungry." Beneath the floorboards, something stirs. The scratching begins again. The siren in the attic. The village of Wetherby-on-Thames lay cloaked in fog as Evan Fisher trudged up the gravel drive to Ravenscroft Manor. Built in 1882 by a shipwright obsessed with sea shanties, the mansion's gables mimicked the billowing sails of a ghost ship. Floorboards sighed beneath his boots. The air smelled of mothballs and salt, an odd perfume for an inland estate. Evan had arrived to prepare for the most important audition of his career. The London Symphony's principal violindesk. He settled in the dusty attic room, its single dormer window overlooking gnarled oaks. As twilight seeped through cracked panes, he unpacked his Stradivarius, unaware that tonight he would share the stage with a voice from beyond. At first, the music was a whisper, just beyond hearing, like the echo of waves against a distant hull. Evan paused in his warm-up, bow hovering above strings. Silence answered. He lowered the instrument and leaned toward the window. A pale mist curled through the gardens. Moonlight fractured on dew-laden branches. Then came the melody. 4 notes, drawn out and plaintive, slipping through the board and batten siding. It was a violin's lament, neither sorrowful nor joyful, but something in between, an ache. Evan set aside his modern editions and followed the sound up a narrow service stair. The attic corridor lay strewn with crates of china and varnished trunks. Shadows fanned across peeling wallpaper, revealing stylized mermaids and sea serpents, icons of the manor's nautical past. The tune grew clearer, more insistent, weaving through the gloom like a siren's call. Each step quickened his pulse. Sweat beaded at his hairline despite the cold air. He found a second, smaller door, unlocked, though its iron latch gleamed new. Inside was a chamber no larger than a coachman's closet, its walls hung with rotting tapestries. A single oil lamp flickered on a rafted beam. Beneath it hovered a translucent figure, a woman in a sodden gown, violin tucked under her chin. Her fingers curved impossibly long, drawing a melody that tugged at Evan's marrow. He raised his violin in answer. The ghost's lips parted in a faint smile. Their notes entwined in the cramped space, his precise vibrato weaving through her mournful arpeggios. The attic planks vibrated, the lamp guttered. Evan's bow moved of its own volition, carried by the current of that otherworldly hymn. He felt a chill bloom at his core as the ghost halted on a fragile trill. Then she nodded, urging him to complete her unfinished adagio. Evan hesitated, recalling a faded journal he'd found earlier in the library. Its final entry, dated 1893, belonged to Annalise Moreau, the manor's last lady of the house. She wrote of an engagement in Paris, of a solo she never played because the seance she held to contact a drowned lover went terribly wrong. The adagio, Annalise vowed, would break the boundary between life and death. With trembling resolve, Evan drew a long, resonant bow across the strings. The note rang out, pure and lingering. The ghost's face softened, tears glimmering like wet pearls. As the final tone faded, a hush swallowed the attic. The lamp flared white. The specter reached for Evan's hand, but her form collapsed into motes of light, drifting upward through the rafters like ashes. Evan stumbled back into the main attic, breath shallow, hands slick with cold sweat. Dawn's first light filtered through the dormer, washing the room in a gentle glow. On the dusty floor lay a single sheet of parchment, and ink still wet. A notation of the lost adagio, Annalise's final song in Evan's own hand. He left Ravenscroft Manor before sunrise, the manuscript tucked in his coat. At his audition, he performed the piece flawlessly, his bow coursing with uncanny emotion. Judges wept. The audience sat spellbound. Yet long after the applause faded, when the world softened into night, Evan heard that plaintive melody winding through his dreams, always accompanied by a whisper.
Play for me once more.
Never alone. I moved into the house last fall, a little cottage at the edge of town, tucked behind a curtain of pine trees and wrapped in silence. It was cheap, quiet, and came with just enough crease in the floorboards to feel lived in, but not haunted. I was grateful for that. I needed peace. It was the first place I'd ever had to myself. No roommates, no boyfriends, no shared leases with passive-aggressive chore charts. Just me. I could finally buy the soap I liked, light candles that smelled like anything but pine, and leave my bras hanging off chairs without apology. I live alone. Or I thought I did. The first time it happened, I chalked it up to forgetting. A light left on in the hallway when I swore I'd turned it off. A spoon in the sink I didn't remember using. Small things. Annoying but explainable. Then it got stranger. I started waking up to the closet door cracked open, just a sliver, like someone had peeked in or out. I'd shut it and go to bed, and the next night, there it was again. This was repeated a few nights until I finally stopped bothering to close it. One morning, I found muddy footprints in the entryway. Just one set, small, really small. I didn't own shoes that size. I didn't even own mud. The yard had been bone dry for weeks. I checked the locks. I checked them twice. Nothing was broken, nothing stolen. Just the footprints leading to the basement door. I don't go down there much. It smells like earth and iron. And there's a crawl space at the back I never dared look into. Too low to stand in, too dark to see. I kept it shut tight until one night I heard humming. I was brushing my teeth, the sound soft at first, childlike, the same low tune over and over again echoing up through the vents. My blood ran cold. I froze, toothbrush in hand, and strained to listen. It stopped the moment I moved. I slept on the couch that night with all the lights on. The next morning, the basement door was open, wide open. That was the first time I considered leaving, but I didn't. I told myself it was stress, fatigue, or a dream maybe. People hear things all the time in old houses. That's all it was. I told myself that, over and over. Then something changed. I came home from work and the hallway light was on. Again. But this time, there was something new, written on the mirror in the fog of the bathroom were the words, "Stop closing the door." I hadn't taken a shower that morning. The mirror shouldn't have fogged up. My stomach dropped and I backed out of the room like it might lunge at me. I slept in my car that night. This morning, when I went back inside, the house was calm, quiet, too quiet. But on the kitchen table, where I always leave my keys, sat a small object, a child's tooth, still red at the root. I didn't call the police. I should have. I know that. But what would I have said? Hi, yes, someone might be living in my walls and left a baby tooth on my table. Oh, and they write messages in fog and hum lullabies through the vents. I'm sure they would have rushed right over. So instead, I threw the tooth in the trash, grabbed the flashlight I kept in the junk drawer, and went down into the basement. The air down there is always colder than it should be. Not crisp like a refrigerator. No, it's a damp cold, like something breathing just behind the cinder block walls. The kind of cold that sticks to your bones and makes your joints ache. The crawl space is at the far end of the basement behind the old oil tank, a low rectangle in the wall, just about 2 feet high. It used to be covered with plywood, nailed in haphazardly, but that morning it was open, or rather, peeled back. I stared at the black rectangle like it might blink. My flashlight shook in my hand. Then I got on my stomach and I went in. The dirt floor was damp and the smell hit me immediately. Decay and something else. Something sweet and rotten, like a candy apple left too long in the sun. I crawled forward, light dancing off the exposed beams and cobwebs. There were scratch marks in the dirt, fingernails, I think. A trail of them, leading deeper. That's when I saw the bed. Just a pile of old blankets tucked under the foundation, but it had shape, order. Someone had made it. Next to it, a small tin box with children's toys inside. Broken plastic animals, crayons worn to stubs. And off tucked in the corner was a mirror. Small and oval, the kind that belongs on a vanity. The glass was fogged. I wiped it and nearly shat myself. There was a face behind me. Pale, small, childlike, but wrong. The proportions weren't right. The eyes were too big, too glossy, and too still. The mouth was open, but no breath came out. I turned. My flashlight flickered. Nothing, just dirt. I crawled backward fast enough to scrape my elbows raw. I slammed the plywood back over the entrance, nailed it shut with shaking hands, and haven't gone down since. But now I hear them every night. 2 sets of footsteps. One light, one heavy. And sometimes, when I lie very still pretending to sleep, I hear breathing under the floorboards, right beneath my bed. And the worst part? Last night I found another message on the bathroom mirror. Are you my new sister? I don't sleep anymore. I try, I really do. But the breathing is louder now, closer. It's no longer under the floorboards, it's in the walls. Sometimes I hear it crawl past my headboard, and the drywall gives a soft crack as something shifts inside. Last night, the hallway light turned on by itself, then off, then on again. Click, 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 like it was deciding. I finally called someone. Not the cops. I know, I should have, but I didn't. I found a guy online. His name was Darren, and he said he specializes in hard-to-explain problems. I didn't care how insane that sounded. I just needed someone else, anyone, to be inside this house with me. Darren showed up this morning with a suitcase full of gear and a face that looked like it had seen too much already. "I get a lot of these," he said, stepping through the threshold. "But yours feels bad." I agreed and began explaining what was happening. The door, the crawl space, the tooth, all of it. But he didn't respond much, just nodded and started scanning the place, room by room, EMF meter in hand. A little recorder clipped to his jacket. I followed him, too afraid to be alone in any room, even my own. After 2 hours of nothing, Darren paused outside the basement door. He looked at it and then at me. "You said the face was down there?" I nodded nervously, and he opened the door. The smell hit us like a wall. Damp, sweet, foul. "Something's dead down there," he muttered. I wanted to run, but he flicked on his shoulder lamp and descended. I stood at the top of the stairs, cold sweat running down my back. A minute passed, then another. I called out, "Darren?" No answer, just a sound. It wasn't Darren, and it wasn't footsteps. It was dragging, like something was being pulled slowly across the dirt floor. I backed away, not realizing I was holding the doorknob so tight my knuckles went white. I called for Darren to come back in one last hopeful attempt, and a voice floated up from the dark. But it wasn't Darren's. It was weak and quiet, like a child's voice. "We're not finished playing." Then the basement light flickered, and I heard giggling as something ran off, out of view. I slammed the door shut, and I haven't opened it since. That was 3 days ago. The door to the basement is nailed shut now. I hear scratching from the other side sometimes, and sometimes I hear Darren's voice whispering through the vent, telling me to let him out. But it's not him. I know that. Can't be. Yesterday, I went to leave, to just walk away from this whole cursed house. But the front door wouldn't open. Every window shows something different when I look out. Sometimes it's night when it's supposed to be day. Sometimes it's not even my yard. Last night, I woke up and someone had tucked me in, folded the blanket, turned off the lamp, left a note on the pillow in a child's handwriting. "Play with us." And this morning I could hear them again, the footsteps, walking in sync with me just behind the walls. One light, one heavy, and a third pair that sounded like boots. And now I can hear breathing behind my mirrors. They warned me not to enter the birch grove. What I found will terrify you. Mist curled like spectral fingers through the gnarled trunks of the old birch grove. Moonlight, pale and tremulous, filtered through trembling silver leaves onto the forest floor, where footprints of 100 lost souls seemed to linger. I arrived at the edge of this grove on a bitter autumn night, drawn by whispers in my blood. Ancient warnings my grandmother uttered with trembling lips. "The forest remembers," she had said, "and when it calls your name, you must never answer." Yet there I stood, heart pounding, as if something unseen had tugged at my sleeve. The village behind me lay silent beneath the domes of its wooden church, its few lanterns flickering against low, sod-roofed huts. Beyond the last cobblestone street, cattle huddled in pens and smoke rose lazily from stout chimneys. Normal life pressed close, but here on the threshold of the grove, all familiarity unraveled. The air smelled of damp moss and decay, and every snapped twig echoed like a warning drum. I felt the brush of cold sweat on my nape, the sudden stiffening of nerves as the night breathed around me. They said no one who ventured beyond the birch line ever returned the same. They said the gods of the forest demanded the toll. They said the wind would mimic your voice and the trees would close behind you, trapping your soul. I was afraid, but fate, it seemed, had already chosen me. I took my first step beneath the arch of white bark, and the grove exhaled into silence. The deeper I walked, the more the world I knew slipped away. My flashlight's beam danced over roots like arthritic fingers and over toadstools emitting phosphorescent halos. Far overhead, branches knotted into shapes that could have been skulls. Each step crunched on a carpet of rust-red leaves, a brittle reminder that nothing living here welcomed me. My footsteps seemed too loud, as if a choir of hidden listeners recoiled at the intrusion. After 15 minutes, which felt like an eternity, I found an abandoned well, its stone rim worn smooth by centuries of rain. I peered over, straining to see bottom, but the water was ink-black and still. A single shimmering ripple shivered across its surface, as if answering some unspoken question. I remembered the legend of the drowned maiden, a rusalka, who lured young men to their deaths in icy pools. A laugh, half-choked, rose in my throat. Folk tales, I reminded myself. Myths to scare children. Yet then I heard my name, breathed on the midnight wind. Ivan. The familiar syllables twisted into something cruel. I froze. My flashlight trembled. Ivan, it whispered again, closer. My heart leaped. My name, used by the forest itself. I spun around. Nothing but birches, glowing silver in the moonlight. I ran. Branches grabbed at my clothes, roots nearly buckled my ankles. Somewhere beyond, a wolf's howl answered. Too many wolves in concert. Panting, I stumbled into a clearing dominated by a rotting wooden cross draped in rotten ribbons. Beneath it lay a small heap of offerings, animal skulls, rusted sickles, handfuls of ash. I recognized the pattern, a sacrificial shrine to Leshy, the forest spirit who rules all beasts. Instinct told me to flee, but curiosity clamped my feet. I crouched and studied the symbols carved into the cross, spirals of the sun, the sickles of the harvest, the crescents of the moon, all twisted into grotesque mockeries. A crackle of branches behind me made me whirl. A tall figure stepped into the faint halo of my light. His coat was made of birch bark, his eyes glowed amber, antlers crowned his head, and his breath steamed in the cold air. Leshy. I should have screamed. Instead, I stood rooted, breath gone. The spirit raised one finger pointing toward the well. Ivan, it said in a voice like rusted bells. Then it vanished, melting into the trees. My mind reeled. The night air grew heavy, laden with voices, ancient prayers, curses, lullabies of the deep woods. I saw shadows dancing between trees, faces in the bark, silhouettes hunched over hollow logs. Something scraped the well's edge. A pale arm, slick as fish scales, reached for the moon. A woman's lips formed words I could almost understand. Stay, stay with me. I fled blindly toward the rim of the grove, fording narrow streams and leaping over mounds of blackened earth until the church spire glimmered like a white promise beyond the trees. The moment I crossed the threshold of open meadow, the world exhaled. Crickets sang. Stars winked indifferently. I fell to my knees, shivering, clasping my knees, tears mingling with sweat. But even then, I heard the whisper carried on the wind. Ivan? Dawn found me stumbling back through the village, face ashen, clothes torn. Neighbors stared from behind shutters. The priest peered at me with concern and fear. I told them nothing. How could I? Words would fail. The church bells tolled for matins, echoing through my skull like funeral knells. My grandmother met me on the steps, her eyes wide as she saw my horror. "You've been marked," she whispered, grasping my arm. "The forest will not let you go." At breakfast, I could barely swallow. Every forkful of kasha tasted of ash. At midday, I resolved to return no matter what, to burn the shrine and break the curse. My pride and desperation flared against my terror. I gathered an axe, lantern, and handful of herbs blessed by the priest, and pressed my trembling lips to the wooden cross hanging over my door, an amulet to ward off evil. By twilight, I stood once more at the birch grove's threshold. A storm thundered in from the west, lightning flickering like jagged runes across slate skies. Rain began to fall, fine and icy, carrying the scent of wet earth and something fouler. I gripped the axe's handle, throat raw with a scream I could not let free. Inside, shadows lunged. My lantern flickered, sputtered, and died. I chopped at the air, and then into a tangle of vines and branches that formed the old shrine. Wood splintered, ribbons fell away, skulls tumbled. A roar, deep and furious, shook the trees. Rain lashed my face. Wind screamed through torn leaves like the wails of the damned. Then came silence. The grove held its breath. From the well, a single clap of thunder resounded, and a pale shape lurched out. A woman draped in seaweed and moss, eyes black as the void. She drifted toward me, her arm outstretched, murmuring my name. "Ivan, stay." Adrenaline flared. I raised the axe and brought it down on the effigy's remains. The shrine shattered in a spray of rotten wood and bone. The spirit screamed, a sound like ice cracking underfoot. The ground heaved. Roots writhed like serpents. Lightning split the sky overhead. A jagged bolt struck the cross I carried at my chest, sending splinters flying and setting me ablaze for a heartbeat of searing agony. Then, nothing. I awoke beneath the silver birches at dawn, soaked by rain but miraculously unharmed. The shrine was gone. No trace of wood, skulls, or vines remained. The well stood empty, its stones smeared with mud. The forest lay silent, as if pauperized of its ancient terror. I staggered home, shoulders aching, heart thundering. In the days that followed, rumors swirled through the village. The shrine mysteriously collapsed in a midnight storm. Villagers claimed to have glimpsed a shape fleeing the clearing. Livestock in nearby pens trembled and bolted without cause. I said only that the grove had been cleansed, but even as I spoke, I heard the faintest rustle of leaves outside my window. My name drifted on the wind. Ivan, Ivan. Now nights are restless. Sometimes I dream of amber eyes in the darkness, of antlered silhouettes beckoning me back. I avoid the cedar door of my grandmother's cottage, afraid she might whisper of fates worse than death. Yet, deep in my bones, I know the forest's call will come again. For it remembers. It knows my name. And when the mist steals in once more through shattered window panes, I fear I will have no choice but to answer. Kell and the Whispering Woods. Kell padded softly along the narrow trail, moonlight glinting on the damp needles under his paws. He was no ordinary bear. His eyes held a patient curiosity. his gait a quiet deliberation born of years spent wandering forgotten wilderness. Tonight, he carried nothing but a battered canvas pack slung over one shoulder, containing a simple kettle, a flint striker, and a well-worn journal. The forest around him had once sheltered an old logging camp, abandoned since the Great Freeze of 1893, when the last lumberjacks vanished without trace. Hollowed stumps and rusted tools lay half swallowed by ferns, whispering of lives long gone. The timber cabins, their roofs caved and walls bowed by creeping ivy, still bore carved initials and crude glyphs rumored to ward off the night walker, a shape-shifting phantom said to hunt the woods under each new moon. Every creak of broken floorboard, every rustle of dead leaves under his claws set Kel's senses alight. A distant owl called 3 times, then fell silent, as if warning him to turn back. Yet he pushed on, drawn by an inexplicable pull toward a clearing where the camp's ancient stone hearth still stood, half covered in moss. The heart of the forest beat in his chest with each measured step. He paused to breathe in the cold air tinged with pine and decaying spruce, then lit a single match. Flames sprung to life, throwing tall shadows that danced across the crumbling chimneys. Kel settled beside the fire, careful not to disturb the brittle bricks. He dangled the kettle over the flicker, listening to the hiss as water met heat. Around him, the darkness deepened into a living thing. The hush before a storm. He lifted his head when the wind sighed through the trees, carrying a faint human-shaped moan that could have been laughter or warning. He leaned forward, heart quickening, and traced the edge of the clearing to where the ground sloped toward a half-buried relic, a monolithic stone carved with spiraling runes, now softened by centuries of rain. Drawn by a blend of dread and wonder, Kel circled the stone, fingertips brushing its damp surface. The runes, stylized bears, lanky figures in top hats and curling vines, seemed to shift under his gaze as if alive. A sudden snap of twigs shoved him back. He whirled to see nothing but the yawning black between trees. His fur bristled. A hush fell so complete that his own breath seemed too loud. Then came the faint crunch, as if someone was stepping just beyond the light of his campfire. In the dim glow, he spotted a figure emerging, a man in oil-spattered overalls, face unseen beneath a dripping hood. He carried an old miner's lantern, its glass cracked, yet it burned with a steady blue flame. Kel's claws dug into the earth, but he dared not roar. Fear, sharp and electric, held him silent. The stranger stood motionless, then lowered the lantern. Through the fractured glass, Kel saw, or thought he saw, 2 bright embers in hollow sockets. A cold sweat trickled down his spine. Kel dropped his pack. The kettle rattled. Flames flickered. He forced himself to blink. The lantern bearer was gone. No prints marked the soft earth. No scent trailed back to the forest's edge. Only the stone hearth glowed red in the dying firelight, and the carved runes pulsed faintly as though breathing. Kel leapt to his feet, heart hammering in his throat. He raced for the stone relic, fingertips grazing its spiral script. A low rumble thrummed through the ground. The runes flared bright as ghost-white fire. A shape rose from the shadows on the far side of the stone, a great crooked silhouette, half man, half bear, its mouth agape in a silent roar. Kel's pulse hammered, each second stretched to an eternity. He mustered every ounce of courage, baring his teeth in a defiant snarl. The creature, Kel's own distorted reflection in the lantern glass, lunged with impossible speed. Kel lunged back, slamming his shoulder into the monolith. With a shuddering crack, one of the carved panels split open. A blinding light shot forth, swallowing both bear and phantom in a searing burst. When Kel's claws slid back into the forest floor, the night was calm again. The runes lay shattered fragments, dull beneath the moon. No echo of the blue fire remained. Kel panted, muscles trembling as distant thunder rolled through the canopy, though the sky overhead was clear. By dawn, Kel was gone from the clearing. The campfire was nothing but charred bricks. The stone relic had crumbled to dust. Deep in his pack lay his battered journal, its pages smeared with ash. On the first blank leaf in Kel's careful script appeared a single sentence. Some legends sleep beneath the earth, but others only wait for the bold to wake them. As the sun rose over the old logging camp, the woods returned to stillness. Only the faintest whisper lingered through the pines, a hint that somewhere, beyond the veil of night, the night walker still watched. And so a new tale was born, carried by Kel the bear into the lore of whispered campfire stories, where fear never truly dies. Tom and the shadow that waits.
You summoned me.
Every night, long after the last car rolled past their small suburban house, Tom lay awake beneath his quilt, heart hammering against the hush. His room smelled of lavender air freshener and old pine furniture, a reassuring comfort by day. A brittle promise when darkness fell. A single nightlight, shaped like a crescent moon, cast a pale glow across the warped floorboards, but the corners of the room dissolved into an obsidian void. As a boy of 9, Tom knew every creak and groan of the old house, how the pipes rattled when the fridge cycled, how the branch outside his window scraped against the glass in the wind. But lately, he sensed something more, a presence that slithered just beyond the circle of light, something patient, something that watched. His grandmother had whispered long ago tales of the dusk walker, a spirit that crept through cracks in walls and slipped beneath doors, feasting on fear. Tom had laughed it off until the whisper started. Soft, sibilant breaths behind his ear, impossible to place, yet undeniable. He pinned his gaze on the cracked mirror above his dresser, searching for movement in its fractured reflection, but found only his own wide-eyed face staring back. Tonight, like every night, he clutched his stuffed rabbit buttons and imagined the fabric would keep him safe. The moonlight trembled across his walls. He held his breath. Listen. The first hint came as a tap, tap, tap at the door. Light footsteps, too soft to be his father's, too deliberate to be the wind. Tom froze. His pulse hummed in his ears. He dared not scream. The steps retreated, then circled around to the foot of his bed. From beneath the blankets, Tom peered into the gloom. Shadows pooled there as black as an oil slick. In the moon's faint glow, he made out a sinewy shape. Crouched, the thing had no face, only a slick, formless head that tilted in a mocking curiosity. Its shoulders hunched, and its long fingers scraped the edge of his quilt. Tom dared a whisper. "Who's there?" No answer, only a scraping hiss. He bolted upright, pressing his back against the headboard. He yanked the quilt higher, buttons clutched to his chest. The nightlight sputtered, its glow flickering once, twice, then steadied. A heartbeat of false security. Tom's eyes darted to the mirror. The cracked pane now held a second silhouette behind his own. In a rush of childish bravery, he swung his legs over the bedside and snatched a paper bag from the floor. He hurled it at the mirror. The book struck the glass, sending a spider web of fractures across the reflection. For a heartbeat, he expected the thing to vanish, but instead it leaned forward, palms flattening against the inside of the mirror, as if pressing outward. A low, rattling whisper filled the air. "Let me close." The distance. Tom's breath froze. The thing spoke in his grandmother's voice, warped into something vile. He shrieked, scrambling for the door, but his legs tangled in the quilt. The phantom reached one long hand through the broken glass, fingers flexing in hunger. Tom lunged forward, ripping free, and tumbled into the hallway. His sneakers slapped the wood as he fled toward his parents' room. Outside, the hall was impossibly longer than he remembered. Each step stretched into an echo. The door at the end, his parents' room, trembled, light spilling beneath it like a promise. He pounded his fist. His mother stirred, then yanked the door open. Warm lamplight poured out, banishing the blackness. "Tom, what's wrong?" she cried, pulling him inside. His father flicked on the main light, scanning the empty hallway. "There's nothing here, buddy." Tom shook, gasping. "It was in my room, a thing." His mother hugged him tight. "Just a bad dream." But Tom knew. That night, Tom resolved to end it. He crept back to his room with a flashlight, buttons asleep in his jacket pocket. The door closed behind him with a soft click. He clicked on the beam, a narrow spear of white, cutting through the murk. He trained it on the cracked mirror. The moonlight glanced off the splintered glass, revealing the faintest movement across the room. The flashlight trembled in Tom's hand, and the beam danced to the corner behind his dresser. There, the shape crouched once more, watching. In the beam's glare, it had form. A hunched figure, rib-like shadows beneath translucent skin, eyes glowing dull ember red. Tom swallowed his fear. He backed toward the mirror, raising buttons above his head like a talisman. "I'm not afraid of you," he shouted. The creature's head snapped toward him. It hissed, a sound like metal scraped across bone. With a lunge, it burst from the corner, faster than thought. Tom stumbled back, crashing into his dresser. Mirrors shattered, drawers flew open. In the chaos, Tom raised buttons and slammed him down onto the creature's hand. The stuffed rabbit split open, white cotton fluff spiraling into the air. The thing recoiled, shrieking, a sound that tore at Tom's nerves. He hurled buttons again, striking its face. The creature staggered, then dissolved into writhing shadows that sank into the cracks in the floorboards. Silence. Tom sank to his knees, heart racing, breath ragged. The shards of glass glinted underfoot. He gathered the largest piece of mirror. It felt impossibly heavy in his trembling hands. When dawn filtered through his window, Tom awoke sprawled on the floor, glass fragment clutched to his chest. His parents stood over him, worry etched on their faces. "You screamed for hours," his mother murmured, brushing hair from his brow. "Just a nightmare, Tom." Tom offered a small, shaky smile. He held up the mirror shut. In its reflection, he saw not the creature, but his own pale, wide-eyed face. Yet at the edge of his vision, A slender handprint lingered on the glass, too high for his own fingers. As he rose, Tom tucked the shard into his bedside drawer. The nightlight blinked off at sunrise, and he felt its absence keenly, as though a promise had been broken. He clasped buttons tight. Somewhere, just beyond the walls of his room, the shadow that waits stirred once more, biding its time. And Tom, with every beat of his racing heart, vowed he would never turn out the light again. The Midnight Fair. The neon of Sunset Boulevard flickered like a fever dream through Dimitri's windshield as he glided down the empty stretch of asphalt. He flexed his hands around the steering wheel, feeling the familiar roughness of leather beneath his fingers, comforting proof that he had built this life from scratch, far from Moscow's rigid winters. In Los Angeles, the air tasted of gasoline, street tacos, and the promise of anonymity. Still, every creak in the taxi's suspension, every stray footstep echoing off the pavement, reminded him how fragile a newcomer's safety could be. Dmitri pressed a button to open the meter, spotted his reflection in the rearview mirror, dark circles under eyes that had known too many late nights, a face simultaneously hardened by struggle and soft with hope. He adjusted the mirror, scanning the empty back seat for ghosts. The city slumbered, but every night held its secrets. He inhaled deeply, the scent of stale coffee lingering on his breath, and whispered to himself in Russian, "Be ready." When the ride request pinged at 2:13 a.m., Dimitri's heart gave a small thump. The pickup was 2 miles north, near a rundown motel notorious for transient guests. Through the rearview mirror, he watched a solitary figure emerge from beneath the yellow glow of a flickering lamp. The man was tall, his shoulders broad under a black leather jacket zipped halfway, revealing a threadbare hoodie stained with something Dmitri dared not name. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets. When he climbed in, the cab fell silent, save for the soft click of the door. Dmitri forced a casual, "Good evening. Where to?" The passenger's voice came low with a slight drawl. "Out. By Pacific Coast Highway. Somewhere quiet." He supplied no address, just directions. Left at the overpass, straight past the cliffs, and onto a narrow side road, lined with cypress trees. As Dmitri merged onto the freeway, he flicked on the radio. A late-night news bulletin crackled through static. Police have discovered 2 more bodies near the coastline. No leads yet on the so-called lighthouse killer. The passenger's shoulders stiffened. Dimitri's pulse quickened. The man pulled out an old smartphone, thumbs tapping a message so rapidly the screen glowed against his palm. Dmitri caught fragmented words in plain sight. "Midnight. Ready by morning." The hairs on Dimitri's neck prickled. He reminded himself to keep calm. He wasn't safe if he panicked. Not with this stranger in the back. He switched off the radio and feigned fumbling with the controls. So, PCH at dawn. Nice view. His tone was light, but every muscle coiled tight. The stranger's silence weighed on him like cold steel. On the horizon, the city's glittering sprawl gave way to coastal darkness. Waves crashed faintly, an echo of distant thunder. The passenger leaned forward, voice barely more than a rasp. "How long you've been driving, friend?" 2 years, Dmitri said, gripping the wheel. "Moscow-born, learned the streets here." The man considered him a moment, then nodded slowly. "Streets can be hungry. A tremor ran through Dimitri's sleeve. He glanced at the rearview mirror again. In the dim light, he thought he saw a smudge of rust, blood, on the passenger's cuff. His breath caught. He forced himself to smile. Hungry? Yeah. The side road dipped into a grove of cypress. Shadows danced like specters across the asphalt. Dimitri slowed. The air grew colder. The engine's hum seemed alien in the hush. The passenger tapped his knee, the leather creaking. Stop here. He indicated a dirt drive veering away from the main road. No street lamp, just moonlight and silent trees. Dimitri's mind raced. If he refused, the man could grow suspicious. If he drove on, Dimitri risked being complicit. He swallowed. You sure? The man met his eyes in the mirror. Beneath the hood, his stare was patient, like a predator sizing up prey. He smiled thinly. I'd like to stretch my legs. Dimitri nodded, forced the taxi into the dirt. The tires sunk slightly with a hiss. The engine cut as Dimitri shut it off. He kept his foot poised above the brake, ready to bolt. The passenger unzipped his jacket, revealing gleaming metal at his waistband. A hunting knife with a curved blade, wickedly sharp. Dimitri's chest tightened. His pulse thundered in his ears. Every instinct screamed to flee. Yet, if he leapt out now... In the rearview mirror, the man slid the blade free, thumbing it gently, as if reveling in its cold weight. He turned to Dimitri. You ever wonder why they call me the lighthouse killer? Dimitri swallowed, voice quavering. No. A lonely place, the man murmured, raising the knife so the moonlight traced a silver arc on its edge. Perfect for endings. Dimitri's mind raced back to early mornings at the cab depot. How he dreamt of safety, of building a new life. He couldn't let it end here in a muddy clearing beneath ghost trees. He forced a shaky laugh. Knife's a bit dramatic for a stroll. The killer's head tilted, amused. I prefer drama. He placed the knife handle on the seat, blade pointed at Dimitri. Drive me home. Dimitri's fingers trembled as he turned the key. The engine roared to life. He pressed the brake, then the gas, inching forward. Each inch felt like carrying a death sentence. The passenger slid onto the front seat without a word. The knife lay between them, shining like a promise. In the beam of the taxi's headlights, Dimitri saw the cypress trunks recede, and for the first time in months he prayed. He punched his phone open, thumb hovering over 911. He had 45 seconds before the call connected, 45 seconds to stall. He tapped the gas, merging back onto Pacific Coast Highway with a burst of speed. The killer leaned back, cross-armed, studying him with satisfaction. Dimitri forced a steady tone. Bad night for a walk, huh? The killer smiled, lips curling. The night chose me. At last, the glow of distant streetlights appeared, the outskirts of a coastal town. A small police cruiser idled by the roadside. Dimitri exhaled so hard he coughed. He let his thumb slide off 911. No call made. Instead, he drove past the cruiser, heart racing, until the quayside motels came into view. The killer tapped the knife against the window quietly. Here. Dimitri stopped. The man slipped out, grabbed the blade, and turned. Thanks for the ride, Dimitri. His voice was soft, almost tender. Then he vanished into the fog that rolled in from the ocean. Dimitri sat alone in the idling taxi, rain-slicked streets shining under a sallow street lamp. The knife lay abandoned on the passenger seat, its blade smeared with something dark. He stared at the steel edge and felt the marrow chill. He did not dare touch it. When dawn broke, he slipped away from the key without telling anyone. Back at his apartment, he locked every door, double-checked every window. He still dreamed of the man's smile and the gleam of that knife. Dmitri replayed every moment in his mind, searching for clues he'd missed. He found them. The stains, the words on the screen, the silent pleasure in the passenger's eyes. He understood now. He had driven not just a passenger, but a monster. And as the sun rose over Los Angeles, Dmitri knew one truth. Some fares are more than just a trip. Some are nightmares you survive by a hair's breadth. And that midnight ride would haunt him forever. My sister found the tapes in the attic after the funeral, hidden away in a cardboard box filled with a dozen or so tapes. Our father's version of a time capsule, I suppose. She gave me 3 of them before I left to return home, stored in a Ziploc bag, as if she thought they'd rot or leak if left unsealed. I think Dad meant for you to have these, she said, her voice distant. He kept them separate from the others. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Just old home movies. Nostalgia, maybe. Or his version of a time capsule. It wasn't until 2 weeks later, on a rainy Wednesday night, that I started digging through them. I'd had too much to drink, and I felt sentimental. The tapes were high-8 cassettes from the late 90s. On them were handwritten labels, written in an elegant hand. Springfield Trip, 93 First Steps, 1994, Xmas, 95. And under each label, Nate, my name, had been scratched on with a black marker. There was something comforting about the handwriting. Familiar, but not quite. A strange nostalgia, like remembering a dream from someone else's childhood. I found an old camcorder Dad had bought me back in the day, plugged it into the TV with a mess of Frankenstein cords, stuck the oldest tape in, and hit play. The screen flickered, static, then a baby me, I guessed, being held by a woman I didn't recognize. We were in a wide field, must have been summer. She had curly brown hair, big sunglasses, and a laugh that came from deep in her belly. She looked happy, she looked in love, but not with me, with whoever was filming. "That's it, sweetheart," a man's voice chuckled from behind the camera. "Get a close-up of those chubby cheeks." The woman cradled the baby, me, up toward the lens and winked. "That's our boy," she said, and then turned towards something off camera. Her smile faltered slightly. The camera panned over. In the distance, near the tree line, stood a figure, far away, unmoving, dressed in dark clothes, just standing there, watching. "Do you see that?" the woman asked. The man zoomed in slightly. The figure didn't move. "It's probably just someone out for a walk," he said, though his voice was quieter now. She turned to him. "That's the same man from yesterday, Frank." The camera jolted slightly, a jerk of motion, and then static, a hard cut. I rewound and played it again and again, unsure what to make of it all. A creeping chill crawling up the back of my neck. The second tape was First Steps. Same woman, same man, same baby Nate. But this time, something was off. The house didn't match my memories. The wallpaper wasn't the one I grew up with. The couch was a different color than in any family photo. When I took those first steps, wobbling and laughing, I fell into the arms of that same strange woman. She kissed me on the cheek. "You did it, my big boy." In the background, through the window, at the edge of the yard, just beyond the fence, that same figure, still, staring. I paused the tape, rewound it, went frame by frame. And there it was. Black clothes, long dark hair, pale skin, a barely visible face, but one I recognized. The man filming stepped into frame briefly. Broad shoulders, strong jaw, glasses. Not my dad, or at least not the man I'd grown up calling father. He gave the woman a kiss on the cheek, and together, with their child, me, they made a perfect family. Then came the third tape, Xmas 95. This one started out warm, familiar. The living room glowed with garland and wrapping paper. A crooked artificial tree stood in the corner. Holiday music crackled from the radio. The woman, my real mother, I realized, wore a red turtleneck, no makeup, just joy in her eyes. She handed a present to the baby version of me, a toddler in green footy pajamas. Frank, that was his name. The man from the earlier tapes smiled from the carpet. He adjusted the camera on the tripod and gave a thumbs up. "All right, Nate," he said. "Let's see what Santa brought you." He stood and knelt beside me, helping tear the paper. The camera, now unattended, faced slightly askew, catching the hallway just past the living room. Then, movement. A tall figure stepped into view. His hair was jet black, his clothes are dark, his posture was stiff and wrong. He stood half lit by Christmas lights, staring straight ahead. It was the man I knew as Dad, the man who raised me. But here, in this footage, he was something else. My mother's gasp came first. "Frank," she whispered. "Frank, he's here." Then scuffling and the sound of paper crinkling. Frank moved quickly, rising to stand between the stranger and his family. "You need to leave," Frank shouted. "This is our house. What do you want?" My baby self started crying, and the man in dark clothes stepped forward, a glint of metal by his side, a crowbar. Then chaos followed, a scream, a crash. The camera jolted off the table, landing half beneath the couch, angled low toward the floor. It didn't stop, it kept recording. Screams, sobbing, the clatter of glass, a child's wail. And with a heavy thud, a body fell into view. Within the sliver of view beneath the couch, Frank dropped into frame. He was bleeding, coughing, one arm twisted beneath him. A heavy boot stepped over him. The man. Frank looked panicked, and with a sickening squelch of meat and bone, the man beat Frank to death, striking his face with the crowbar. Once, twice, again. The screen flickered and went static, but it wasn't over. After a few seconds, the tape resumed. A different house, a different Christmas, new wallpaper, new tree, quieter. I was older now, around 3 years old, smiling, unbothered, opening a present, a toy dinosaur, battery operated. When I pressed its back, it roared. I grinned. From behind the camera, "Do you like it?" my father asked. I nodded, smiling and playing with my new friend. But in the background, just barely, almost missed, came the muffled sound of a woman crying, begging. Please, please don't hurt my baby. Then footsteps. A door opened. The same voice from the camera yelled something down the hall or down the stairs. I didn't flinch, just pressed the dinosaur's button again. It roared. And I laughed. The video ended. I sat there long after the screen went black. The camcorder was still humming, but I couldn't move. My heart felt hollow, my body cold. I kept thinking about Frank, about that woman, about the man who took me and made me call him Dad. I kept thinking about the toy dinosaur too. It was still in a box somewhere in my closet, my favorite toy growing up. And I thought about something else, something I hadn't realized until now. In all those tapes, there were no other kids, not even my siblings, just me. I'm going now to call my sister. I need to talk to her about what I watched. I want answers. I want this feeling inside to go away. I want to know what's on the other tapes. Live. The red light flips on to indicate my iPad is recording. Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are doing another Halloween makeup look. I'll start, and whoever can guess the character I'm making up as first wins a prize. I smile into my phone camera. The comments begin to flood. Makeup Squirrel 22. Hi girly, hope your day is good. Hannah B. Can it be? OMG, you are so pretty. Camthaman 69696969 flash us. Typical live. I started doing this makeup lives to help with my tuition. And they do help, really. But sometimes the comments get annoying. Okay, so I'm going in with my favorite face powder. Falling out of love. I want to wear your face. Jesus. Okay guys. So anyways, once I get my powder on, the comments continue. Mostly good. My demographics are mostly girls my age. And normally, it's a fun chat session. Longman 15. Would love to paint your face in something else. Falling out of love. You're so yummy. I bet you taste yummy too. Apparently something is in the air tonight. I try to ignore the weird comments as best as I can. They want a reaction out of you. If you don't give in, they move on to something else. I continue on with my tutorial. Once I add black around my eyes, someone guesses the right answer. Clue. 2 cents. A witch. Congrats, Clownhour. You win the prize. I'll be reaching out afterwards for your shipping details, but you will be winning your very own palette. The same one I used to create this look. Can't wait to twin with you. I continue on with my life and put the finishing touch on. Black lipstick. Once I look in my camera, I must say I do look pretty spooky. Okay guys, we are all finished. What do we think? I move my face closer to the camera so my face fills up the screen, slowly moving my face side to side. Brit Linixo. Gorge. Def. Using this as inspo for my Halloween look. Cara Bear 29. You can pull anything off. Leah Marie Smith. Who is that behind you? My head whips around behind me at my open bedroom door. What? Did you guys see something? I asked the camera. I turn back around and look at my open door. I lived alone in a tiny one-bedroom apartment, so there was no way someone was in my house. I had a cat, that's who they probably saw. It was probably Binks. He's always up to no good when he's not just hiding somewhere. I tell the camera, laughing it off. Sierra Ray, love. 3. I love cats. Leah Murray. Smith. No, there was a person. They were in your doorway. Huh. Leah Marie Smith, are you sure? Did anyone else see anything? California. Girl. I saw a figure. Finley Binley B, 23. Yeah, deaf someone. Okay, guys, maybe we can go check it out together. I try to laugh. It's a very interactive live today. I feel my heart racing and I grab my iPad to take with me into the hallway. Leah Marie Smith, be careful. Cereal? Soup. Girl, are you crazy? Falling out. Louvre. You smell amazing too. My heart stops. The comments come flooding in, berating falling out of Louvre. But I feel like I can't breathe. I'm standing frozen in my hallway. There is no way someone is in here with me. I have a lock. I have a camera. I would have gotten some sort of notification, right? I take a single step towards my living room when I hear the most faint sound. A cabinet in my kitchen quietly closing. Oh my God, I whisper, country girl. What's happening? Silky smooth siren. Well, this is a way to gain followers. Leah Marie Smith. Girl, call the police. I spin around and go back into my bedroom and close and lock the door. I'm shaking. Tears are welling up in my eyes. I need to breathe. I place the iPad on the ground and I pull out my phone and call 911. Once I explain to the operator what's happening, she tells me to breathe and hide. She tells me help is coming. There isn't anywhere to hide in my room though, and I'm sure this person knows that. I have done room tour videos, apartment tours, days in my life with my daily schedule. I even had a series about how I moved my drinking glasses to the cabinet under my sink because Binks gets into the upper cabinets and hides, and I didn't like the idea of having cat hair in my cups. Everything. I showed them how to get me. I crumble on the floor against the door and begin to cry. Mom, OF3 Gigi. OMG, don't cry. We are here with you. Leah Marie Smith. The police are coming. We are right here. Falling out of love. You sound so pretty when you cry. I hear footsteps walking down my hallway and they pause outside my door. Falling out of Louvre. I know this apartment better than I know my own. I know you better than I know myself. You will be happy with me. A sob escapes my throat and I look directly into the camera. My eye makeup is running down my face, smearing in gray patches. I take a deep breath and speak to the camera. Why? Why are you here? Please leave and I'll stop making videos. Please, please don't hurt me. I cry. The doorknob rattles. Leah Marie Smith. Do not open the door. Country girl. We will hunt you down, asshole. Don't touch her. Falling out of love. You're making me sad. I don't like being sad. I hear the footsteps retreat back down the hallway. Are they leaving? It's dead silent for a few moments. I feel my breathing start to calm. Bang, 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 I scream. Police, open up! I heave a sigh of relief and open my door. I figure if they are still here, they will have to fight through the police. But to my shock, my apartment is empty. I peer around corners as I make my way to the front door, and no one is there. When I get to the front door, my shaking hands undo the locks before I pull the door open. To my relief, 2 officers stand before me. "Evening, miss, you call about an intruder?" they ask, moving past me into the apartment. Yes, but I think they left. There's no one here," I stammer. The officer nods and runs his hand through his black hair. "All right, well, we will take a look around. Why don't you have a seat?" he asks. I nod and shakily sit down. His partner, a blonde officer, moves through the apartment with his gun ready, looking behind every corner. "Are you all right?" the first officer asks. I nod. "Were you harmed in any way?" he asks, taking out a notepad. No, just frightened." I clear my throat. "Sorry, I was screaming, so my voice is a little scratchy." "Oh, that's all right," he says. "Let me get you some water from the fridge." "Okay," I say, still dazed. I feel like I can hear my heart beat in my head. The officer goes to my kitchen, grabs me a glass out of my cabinet under my sink, and then pours me some water from the Brita in my fridge. He comes back and hands me the glass. "Here you go. Drinking something will help calm the nerves," he tells me, writing something down in his notepad. I hold the glass, but I don't drink from it. "Yes, I've heard that," I say, looking hard at the officer. Just then, his partner comes back from the hallway. "All clear. If someone was here, they're gone now. We can at least take your statement," he says, gesturing to the dark-haired officer. They take my statement. They take my social media handles down and tell me to stay off lives for a while. "Anything else?" the dark-haired officer asks me as he puts the notepad back in his pocket. "Yeah, officer, just one question," I say, putting the glass I've been holding down on my coffee table. "Sure," he responds, looking at me intently. I tilt my head to the side. "How did you know where I keep my drinking glasses?" Doll eyes. "Have a good night. Stay safe." My last passenger exits the car and slams the door, ignoring my goodbye, engrossed in her phone. "All righty then," I mumble, rating her and opening my map back up. I check the time, and I still have time for one last ride before I should head home for some sleep. I set my signal to available and just wait. My last drop-off was for the college dorms, so if I wait a little bit, I'm sure I'll get another. It's Friday night, everyone's out. I'm tapping my red-painted fingers on my wheel when I see her. A teenage girl standing on the sidewalk under a street light. She's small, maybe 5 feet, large brown eyes with a thick, dark lash, blonde hair pulled back in a braid, and a cardigan covering her shoulders. She has a small brown purse in her hands. She looks like a doll, and she looked anxious. I pull up a little and roll down my window. "Hey, Hun, you okay?" I ask. "Oh, yes, I am. I'm just," she looks down the road, "waiting for my ride." "Are they late?" I ask her. She's quiet as she stares down the empty street. "Yes, I suppose they are," she whispers. She seems scared, and I can't decide if she's scared because of the person or because of their absence. I can wait with you, if you would like, I tell her, putting my status in unavailable on the app. Oh, you don't need to. I'm sure I'll manage, she says shakily. It's no problem. We've already spoken more than me and my last passenger, and I was with her for 20 minutes. I could use the company. Come on in, I tell her, unlocking my door. She pauses and then slowly climbs in. She seems familiar to me, her small frame and blonde hair. Very reminiscent of my sister when we were her age, about 10 years ago. When I see her dress up close, I see it has little flowers all over it. The blush color of the flowers match her cardigan. Your outfit is cute. Very vintage, I love it, I say, handing her a water bottle. She smiles small and mumbles something that sounds like thank you. We sit in silence for a few minutes before her voice squeaks. You have pretty eyes, they're very green, like an olive, she says shyly. Oh, thank you. I made them myself actually. I wink at her. She laughs softly and looks back at the road. It's been about 15 minutes. Do you want to call them? I ask her. I don't have a phone and I don't know the number, she tells me. Do you know where it is that you need to go? I ask her. She looks at me and nods. How about I take you? I do it for a living anyways, I offer. Oh, that's so nice of you, but I don't have any money to pay you with, she stammers. It's on me. Consider it my Good Samaritan act for the day. I pull up my GPS app. Go ahead and put in your address here. She methodically punches in the information. Can I ask you a question? She asks me. Sure, I respond. Why are you being so nice to me? She asks, slowly turning to me. I smile sadly. You seem familiar to me. I think you remind me of my sister. She lives far away from me now. She got married and has kids. I miss her so much, and I would never want her waiting alone outside in the dark. A lot of creeps out at night. I pull up the GPS map. Only 15 minutes away, not bad at all. She seems to accept that as an answer as she leans back and gets comfortable in her seat. You're a nice sister, she tells me quietly. I put the car in drive as I pull out into the road. I definitely tried to be, I respond. We let the radio fill the silence as we drive through an area I'm not super familiar with. The very manicured trees start getting more scraggly as we turn down the dark curve of street. The app says 2 minutes away. So I finally ask her, where am I taking you? I ask her. She doesn't respond as we pull up to iron gates. I slow down and lean forward, trying to see where we ended up. Is this... I begin. Thank you for the ride. You're a very nice person. I like nice people, she tells me, patting my hand. You're welcome, I say slowly, looking at her in my passenger seat. I stop the car, and she unbuckles her seatbelt. I'm Marianne, by the way, she says. I smile back at her. Sadie, it was nice to meet you, Marianne, I tell her. It was a nice drive, and thank you again for the ride home, she beams. Home? I ask, looking up at the rusted sign that has weathered over the years. Goodbye, Sadie. She steps out of the car, waves at me through the window, and walks past the sign I've been staring at. Sanitarium. And then I finally realize where I recognize her from. She doesn't remind me of my sister. She was on the news. She murdered her two sisters in cold blood and took their eyes as souvenirs. They were calling her the doll eyes killer. When they asked her why she did it, she looked at them confused before speaking. Because they weren't nice, she said matter-of-factly. I'm still staring after her slack-jawed when she looks over her shoulder at me and winks. He has no face. This still messes with me and my brother to this day. I'm 23 now, but this happened when I was like 6 or 7. I've told a few people about it, and I know it sounds crazy, but my older brother was there with me, and he remembers everything the exact same way, like word for word. We even randomly bring it up sometimes just to make sure we're not losing it or making stuff up. We've called each other mid-convo with someone else like, "Yo, tell them what happened again." Anyway, here's what went down. Some quick context. I grew up in Hawaii, out in the country, way up in the mountains. At the time, it was just me, my mom, and my older brother. He was 12 or 13 at home. My stepdad was out with our other brothers running errands or something, and my biological dad lived down the mountain, like 45 minutes away. Me and my brother were chilling in our room playing video games. At some point, we noticed it got dark, and the hallway light outside our door was off. We got a little spooked. I remember peeking out and seeing my mom's bedroom light on, and her door open. But the rest of the house was pitch black. I think she told us earlier she was gonna take a bath. I don't fully remember, but somehow we knew she was in the bath. So we go to check on her. Her bedroom's empty, so we go knock on the bathroom door. No answer. We keep knocking, calling out, asking if she's okay. Still nothing. Eventually we just go in, and the tub is full of water. But she's not in there. No mom, nothing else weird. Just a full tub, empty room, and the rest of the house in total darkness. At this point, we're both pretty freaked. My brother puts me on my mom's bed, and he starts calling out for her in the hallway. The way our house was set up, the hallway went past our rooms and off to the left, toward the living room. He's calling out. Nothing. So he comes back and starts trying to call her phone. No answer. Then, the part that still messes me up. We heard a whisper, like clear as day, like someone literally leaned in and whispered right into our ears. It was so real, it felt like my mom was sitting beside us, whispering something secretly to each of us individually. The first thing we heard was, "He's hiding." I screamed. My brother immediately threw my mom's blanket over my head, hugged me tight, and told me to close my eyes. Then same voice, same whisper, but louder. "He has no face." We both lost it. My brother starts calling my stepdad like, "We can't find mom. Weird stuff's happening. I don't know what's going on." He told us to stay put and said he was coming home. Then we called our bio dad too, 'cause depending on where he was, he might get there faster. We just sat there in my mom's room for like 20 to 30 minutes. Nothing else happened, but we were terrified. Eventually, my stepdad got home with our older brothers. They were in high school. We'd already told them what happened, so they immediately started tearing through the house. Attic, closets, everything. My stepdad went toward the living room, and I don't remember exactly how he found her. But I remember hearing people talking and coming out to the living room. She was just sitting in the rocking chair. My stepdad was crouched in front of her, holding her hands, talking to her. I don't even remember what he was saying, but then suddenly, she started laughing. Like this wild, hysterical laugh. Not funny, haha, laughing. Scary laughing. Just non-stop for like a full minute. Then she jumped up out of nowhere, ran to her bathroom, and started throwing up. And what came out wasn't normal. It was black. Like pitch black. We were all just standing there, like, what the actual hell is going on? After that, she was fine. Like, totally normal. But the craziest part? She didn't remember any of it. She said the last thing she remembered was setting up her bath. Nothing after that. She still doesn't remember anything to this day. So yeah, that happened, and it still messes me up. That whispering part especially, it felt so real. And the words? He's hiding. He has no face. Just no. I'll never forget that. Thanks for reading. Just had to get that off my chest again, LOL. I'm never going camping again. 3 years ago, my friend group decided to go on a camping trip. Not just going to an RV park and chilling kind of camping, but a proper tent and campfire trip. See, I'm a chronic glamper. If given the choice between roughing it out in the wild and chilling in an air-conditioned RV, I'm picking the RV every time. I enjoy my creature comforts, and I always have. Jake, one of the guys that runs in our little group, prides himself on being a true outdoorsman. As our group usually ends up taking trips to nearby lakes and national parks, it's become a bit of a strain between the two of us. It'd be one thing if he could respect that I'm not here to have the authentic experience and just want to have fun, but he can't. He needles and mutters about how they could be going to cooler places if only we didn't have to always glam to get out of the damn house. I think that's why I accepted his trip proposal. Normally, I'd shut it down without question. But he'd been getting on my nerves for years. I accepted, thinking I'd prove once and for all that I can do it the rough and tough way. Maybe then he'd leave me the hell alone. Jake planned out a trip for us and our other two friends to a nearby lake on his family's property. When we arrived, I tried to ask where exactly in there we were going, but he'd just smirk. Relax, Matty. The trail's marked. Even you won't get lost. Behind me, Chris and Luke, the other two coming with us, started up a conversation about s'mores and the supposed lake at the place we're going to. I felt my shoulders relax. Jake pulled out a compass and led us due north. According to him, we had to follow the compass a little ways until we found some trees he and his family had marked with red triangles. From there, you follow the path. The sun was going down by the time we spotted the first red triangle. I checked my phone, which said it was about 7:30. I also checked my signal. Nothing. The pack straps were digging into my shoulders, and Luke was huffing as he trudged behind Chris and me. Funny. Despite the fact that Luke was obviously the least capable of us, it's still me that Jake liked to piss on. Jake, I called. He paused and turned to me, a familiar, irritated expression on his face. Can we pause for a minute? I gotta take a piss. I didn't mention that Luke looked ready to puke, but he seemed to see it anyway when he looked at him. Jake huffed. Don't get lost. I want to get to our site so we can get set up. I dropped my pack to the ground and started walking off the trail some. I could hear Luke wheezing behind me, obviously tired from the trek. The woods were quiet as I broke from the trail. I listened around for the birds or crickets, but it was dead silent. I glanced over my shoulder, making sure I was far enough away, and relieved myself. I zipped up and began to turn back when a branch cracked behind me. My head snapped back in the direction of the noise, but there was nothing. I turned and began walking back, and the crunching of leaves started behind me. I stopped, and so did the noise. It was my own footsteps. It had to be, but I started again, faster this time, and nearly broke into a run when the crunching just seemed to get louder and louder. I busted through the tree line, hitting the trail and whirling around to see what had been on my heels. Nothing. I stared out at the forest, waiting. There wasn't even a rustle of leaves from the wind, just silence. "Matt, let's go," Chris called, breaking my staring contest with the empty trees. I turned and jogged up the trail to catch up with them. As I picked my pack up off the ground, I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Did you guys hear that?" They all turned to look at me. "Hear what?" Luke answered. I couldn't quite bring myself to spit it out. After all, what had I heard? Leaves crunching when I walked? I shook my head. Jake continued to lead us toward the campsite, the red triangles leading us ever onwards. I looked at them closer as we passed. They were spray painted on, with each tree being marked on both sides so that they could be seen no matter the direction you were coming from. Each marker was about 5 meters apart, and at any given time, you could see the next few up ahead. The sun was nearly set when we broke through to the spot by the lake. I had to hand it to the bastard. The sight was beautiful. The trees all stood in glorious formation, shades of green mottled with the golden light of the sunset. The water shined a slightly muddy blue-gray, peppered with that same golden light, stretching through the trees. We each picked a spot to pitch our tents. Luke and I got put on tent duty, while Chris and Jake, our 2 more experienced outdoorsmen, went out to find some good sticks for firewood. As I finished getting my tent up, I glanced over at Luke. He was struggling to get the stakes in the ground. I signed, turning to help. We got his tent pitched and worked together to get the other 2 up. As we were finishing up with Chris's tent, the other 2 came back. I could see Jake looking over his tent, probably ready to find something to criticize me on. I was proud when he couldn't find anything. Chris and Jake threw some of the wood into the spot we designated as our fire pit, putting the rest of it close by for later use. They got the fire started, and we all idly chatted as the sun sank beneath the hills. Luke got up and brought his backpack over. As he unzipped the pack and reached in, I smiled. Hershey's chocolate bars, a box of graham crackers, giant, fluffy marshmallows. I glanced over and saw my grin mirrored on Chris's face. Jake rolled his eyes but obligingly got up to grab some sticks to roast the marshmallows on. We gorged ourselves on granola bars and s'mores as the world around us turned dark. "Hey, Matt," Chris started. I looked at him, mouth and hands sticky with melted sugar. "Earlier today when you ran off to take a piss, what was that all about?" I looked at him puzzled. You ran out of there like a bat out of hell. Then you were all... Did you guys hear that? He pitched his voice up, and my eye twitched. He grinned goofily at me. I didn't quite know what to say. I didn't want to scare Luke, who was looking a bit nervous, and I still wasn't convinced I hadn't made the whole thing up. I thought I heard something behind me, I settled on. Branch snapped kinda loud and it freaked me out. Jake snorted. Really? All that fuss over a branch cracking in the woods? Yeah, I know. That's why I dropped it. It wasn't much. Chris and Luke exchanged a look, seeming to sense that wasn't quite it. But Jake was snickering at my foolishness, and neither quite seemed like they wanted to press. We all went to bed after putting the fire out. I tossed and turned some. But overall, the night passed on without incident. In the morning, we all woke up to the sound of Jake hollering that if we wanted to fish, now was the time before it got too hot. The lake was a blast. We sat around fishing for a while, chatting as the sun rose up in the sky. The fish were particularly hesitant to bite, but as Chris launched into a story, I found myself having a good time anyways. We scrambled some eggs we'd brought along in Jake's fancy cooler over the fire when we got too hungry. I considered asking him if bringing food in was cheating, but it wasn't worth the fight. At about noon, we started swimming. The water was nice and warm from the summer heat, and I spent a good chunk of time just floating and soaking up the sun. That, of course, was ruined when Luke snuck up on me underwater and grabbed me around the gut, flipping me over and giving me a nose full of lake water. We splashed around for a good long while. The thing that drove us back to the shore was our grumbling stomachs. Luke and I were chatting excitedly about finding some good sticks for roasting the hot dogs we brought along when I ran straight into Chris's back. Whoa, Chris, dude, what's... I paused. Chris and Jake were just staring towards our campsite. I followed their gaze. Plastic littered the ground. All the meat we had brought with us had been torn out of its packages and was gone, leaving only the wrappers behind. Luke's tent, which had the marshmallows and chocolate, had its flap shredded. The flap was still zipped up close, but the middle was gaping like an open wound. My blood ran cold. Luke had caught up and was looking as nervous as me. Even Jake looked shaken. I mean, we are in bear territory, I tried to reason. Guess we should have locked down the food a bit better. Jake looked pissed. You think I didn't plan for that? No damn bear is getting into these containers. I don't even know why they would. The meat's all packaged. They say bears are pretty smart. Maybe they... Luke tried. That cooler had a lock on it no bear could undo. It'd have to bust the damn thing open. Silence weighed heavily on us as we looked at the cooler. The nice, shiny, pristine cooler. Maybe we should head back. I mean, we don't have any food left, Luke suggested nervously. I looked up at the sky. The sun was still relatively high, but it was rapidly sinking down. It'd be dark by the time we made it back to our cars. Then I looked over at Luke's tent. I stared at the shredded door, the carefully opened backpack. What was worse? Risking getting lost in the woods or risking staying? That wasn't a real choice, and I knew it. Let's get our stuff packed up and let's go. We have our heavy-duty flashlights, I said. Chris and Luke didn't need any convincing. They hustled to get their tents taken down and their stuff ready. Jake looked hesitant. I don't think leaving now is a good idea. He checked his watch. Already 5:30. By the time we get back, it'll be dark, I know. I agreed. But it's either that or staying here for another night. He huffed and started getting his stuff together. My tent came down easy enough, and I had all my stuff packed quick. When I shrugged on my pack and turned to the other guys, I could see Jake stomping out the fire embers and grabbing his compass. "Everyone got their lights?" he said, bad mood evident. Chris and Luke nodded, although Luke looked vaguely ill at the thought of navigating by flashlight. I wasn't faring much better. We all started back the way we came in. Jake took the lead, following the trail markers. Luke followed close behind him. Chris and I took up the rear, keeping pace beside one another. "You think it was a bear?" he asked. I shrugged. "Done no. Never actually had an encounter with one." "I have," he said. "Dad and I went camping when I was a kid. Family next to us on the grounds didn't properly store up their trash." "You saw it?" "Sure did. Black bear, ugly thing. Spawned a whole lecture from my dad about how to properly store food and trash so you don't attract them." He paused. "Not gonna lie to you, Matt. I don't think this was a bear." I waited for him to elaborate, but he just looked at the cooler Jake was carrying. "We followed all the safety precautions?" "Not just that. We were pretty damn close to the shore, splashing and running around. Just lots of noise. Bears don't like noise." "Jake, what way do we go?" Luke called, interrupting our silent musing. I looked up from my feet, confused. The spray-painted red triangle was visible on the tree ahead of us. Jake paused. "What way do we—" He glanced around. I took the opportunity to do the same. Luke was practically bouncing from foot to foot in his eagerness to go. "Where's the other path go off to? Another part of the lake?" he asked, giving a nervous laugh. Jake wasn't laughing, though. In fact, he was turning an alarming shade of white. I could feel his sudden fear radiating off of him. I was starting to match it. Beyond the tree with our marker, I could distinctly see two paths marked in the same fashion. One veered off slightly to the left, and the other veered off slightly to the right. The marker was dead center. We'd have to choose a path. "Jake, which one goes to our cars?" I asked. It was a testament to how stunned he was that he didn't tear me a new one over for questioning him. There'd only been one path coming up, and it was straight as an arrow. We hadn't even taken a little sidestep, had just marched straight through the woods. Neither of these paths went straight forward like we had when we came up. So what was this? A whole new split, complete with a line of markers for a path that wouldn't take us back to our cars. "Jake, you and your family put these markers up, right? Which way do we go?" I asked, urgency creeping into my voice. I don't know," he said, his voice cracking. "We never really went out from the path. We definitely didn't mark a new path, and we wouldn't mark with the same damn markers." I looked up again. The sun had crept further down, painting the sky with a faint shade of orange. We were getting closer and closer to sunset. "Jake, are you sure we're going the right way?" Chris asked. I turned to see him and Luke huddled together behind us. "Yes. We go right. Ignore the damn markers on the left, we go right." "How do we know, though?" I mean, those aren't the same markers we followed, right? There was only one path coming up, Chris nervously asked. Jake let out a frustrated huff. He slung his pack to the ground and walked over to a tree with some low-hanging branches. I'll climb up here and find the clearing we parked near. That way, we can ignore the damn markers and go to the road. Happy? He snarled before grabbing the branch and beginning to climb. We watched him climb till about halfway up. When the leaves began to obscure him, I could hear the branches rustling as he continued his climb. "Well?" Chris hollered. "I see the road," Jake yelled back. We all let out a sigh of relief. "This whole trip has been a bit of a nightmare," I commented. Chris and Luke both nodded. I waited to hear the crackling of the branches as Jake climbed down. They never came. We waited there at the bottom for what felt like an eternity. "Jake, buddy, you coming down from there?" Chris called. No answer. I frowned, trying to see through the thick canopy. Suddenly, I heard the sound of something hurtling through the branches. The crashing was fast, a free fall, as whatever it was collided with everything in its path. I jumped back in time to avoid being knocked over the head with whatever it was that had fallen. I looked down. A hiking boot lay sideways on the ground, its ties unlaced. I looked back up into the canopy. The wind blew a little harder, shuffling the leaves just enough for me to see higher up the tree. Jake was gone. I blinked once, twice, before turning back to the others. Chris and Luke both were staring at the shoe. Luke had Chris's arm in a vice grip, his breathing beginning to speed up in a telltale sign of panic. Chris looked back up. "Jake, where the hell are you? This ain't funny." Still silent. We waited 5 minutes, then 10. The only noise around us was the wind rustling through the leaves and the sound of Luke getting more and more antsy. When 15 had passed, I turned to Chris. "Left or right?" He looked at me, startled. "What path? Left or right?" "Dude, what are you talking about? We can't leave Jake." "Jake's gone. I don't know how or why he seems to think it's funny to leave us here, scaring us half to death." I took a deep breath. "We gotta get back to our cars. Leave his pack there. When he wants to stop scaring the shit out of us, he can catch up." Chris paused for a long, tense moment before sighing. "Yeah, okay." He looked over at the two paths in front of us. "Look down the left and see if it looks familiar. I'll look down the right." I nodded and walked towards the left path. Chris and Luke began towards the right, looking down it to try and find some indication that was the right path. I walked to the first marker on the left. I couldn't understand why there were suddenly two paths. It didn't make any damn... I stilled. In front of me, a line of wet red had dripped down from the triangle. I watched it gleam, wet, in the setting sun. This marker was new, and now that I was closer to it, I could smell the tang of copper. My heart seized in my chest, and I quickly cut across the paths to Chris and Luke, who were discussing their trail. They turned to me as I approached. "I think this might be it. Both sides of the tree are marked the same way it was when we..." "It's this one. The other..." I sucked in a ragged breath. "The other one's fresh." "Fresh? The hell you mean?" Chris started. I cut him off. It wasn't paint. The red is wet. It's fresh." Someone painted a new path with the same marker. That's so messed up. Why the hell would... Chris, it's not paint. Luke, who had been watching the exchange, cut in. What do you mean it's not paint? What else would it... I could see the moment it clicked for him. Chris too tensed in realization. Is this some kind of joke? You and Jake? He asked, voice dangerously low. I whirled on him, almost hissing in rage. You think I'd plan something like this? With him, of all people? The bastard can't even look at me without a comment on how shit I am at everything. The only reason he even lowered himself enough to pass me an invite is because he knew the two of you would want me to come along. And you think of what? Plan some scary haunted trail? Even as I said it, I knew he didn't. Neither of them did. They both just wanted some rational explanation for all of this. I pushed past Chris to check the trail marker. I got close and checked it. My heart about stopped. It was wet. I turned back towards the clearing we were in before, charging across towards the markers we had been following. Wet, wet, wet. All tinged with a coppery smell we'd been marching by too quickly to notice. I turned back towards Chris and Luke and saw Chris was right behind me. "They're all wet?" he asked, wrinkling his nose as the smell hit him. We shared a glance, looking at the triangle nearest to us. Now what? I couldn't help but wonder. Here we were, in a rapidly darkening forest, lost without anyone who was even slightly familiar with the area. "I've got a compass in my pack," Chris answered. He set his pack on the ground and rummaged through it for a while before triumphantly pulling out the instrument. Jake had his on him when he went up that tree. But I have my own. He pointed in a direction off to our right. South is that way. We go that direction. We should get close to the road. As long as you and me and Luke stay close together, we'll be fine. I nodded and turned towards where Luke was. You hear that? We'll be fine. We just stick together and... Luke was gone. Nausea slammed into me, turning my limbs into goo. Chris wildly looked around, calling for Luke. I grabbed onto his sleeve, terrified. "Chris," I said, keeping my voice low. He stopped his frantic yelling and looked at me. "Chris, we need to get to the road and get back to our cars. Matt, we can't just leave Luke here. Jake knows this place. But Luke..." "Chris, we get to the car and we go somewhere with signal and call the cops. They can come out here with dogs and search and rescue teams. But for right now, we have to go." I could see him internally fighting a battle, but in the end he nodded. I kept a hold of his sleeve as he led us south. The woods finally got dark enough that I grabbed the flashlight with my free hand. Chris went to grab his too, but I stopped him. "I've got the light. You keep leading us straight." He didn't fight me. He just nodded and continued leading us. Finally, I could see something between the trees, the road. I could hear Chris give a little sigh of relief, and we both started walking a little faster. "Where's the other path go off to?" "Another part of the lake." A voice called behind us. We stopped. Dread crawled up my spine as Luke's voice washed over me. Chris was about to turn and call when I let go of his arm and covered his mouth. He looked at me, angry, when the voice came again. "Jake, what way do we go?" I felt a whimper crawl up my throat. I met Chris's eyes and jerked my head in the direction of the road. He nodded. We crept forward, taking care to keep our steps as light as possible. Behind us, sounding like he was wandering the forest, Luke's voice continued. The nausea increased tenfold as I realized it was just repetitions of things he had said earlier. The road ahead of us was clearer than ever, and as if heaven itself was lighting the way, it was lit in a soft, golden glow. Chris broke free of my grasp and ran forward. The crunching of leaves and sticks beneath him caused the voice to stop, and suddenly the sound of something barreling through the trees made its way to my ears. I sprinted after Chris, unwilling to turn and see what was behind us. We broke from the tree line, scared to death. The noise behind us didn't slow down. "Run across the road, run!" I called, not even slightly slowing. I vaguely noticed that the light seemed to be getting brighter, but I ignored it in favor of sprinting harder. Chris cleared the road, and I was right behind him. I heard an odd noise, almost like brakes squealing. I spun around in time to see something big behind us get thrown forward across the road as a car slammed into it. My jaw dropped as everything seemed to come to a stop. The car was dented on the hood, and its driver stumbled out, confused. I didn't hesitate. Neither did Chris. We ran up her, urging her back into the car. I think she caught sight of what it was she hit, because she just faintly told us to get in the back. We clambered in as she put the car in reverse and turned the car around. She started the car back towards town, and I couldn't help but stare out the back window. As the driver took a turn and the thing was going out of view, I saw it twitch and begin to rise up. The driver's name was Eve, and she was trying to head home from a work trip in another city. She'd been passing through by pure happenstance and was grilling us on what the hell that thing was. A deer? An elk? A moose? It's awful. Far down south from moose, but damn if that sucker wasn't big. I just asked her to drop us off at the police station. She looked back at us, confused, but said that was fine. I closed my eyes. When we got there, we told them the whole story. They obviously had some questions, and I knew they didn't believe us on multiple parts. They told us not to leave town, and that they'll have some more questions for us later. They took us up in the morning to get our cars. When we got to the spot, we'd parked. The cops looked just as baffled as Chris and I had felt this whole trip. Every window of all 4 cars was shattered. The tires were slashed with great big gashes, and the trunks had been ripped open by force. Luke's car even had a door ripped off its hinges. The offending piece of metal bent out of shape a few yards away. The cops just took us home. They never found Jake or Luke. Chris and I still keep in touch every now and again. I think that trip put a strain on our friendship. Eve and I, meanwhile, got a whole lot closer. So close, in fact, she's right here beside me as I type this. I don't know what's prompting me to recall this. Maybe some form of exposure therapy or a way to get it off my chest. I'm not sure. All I know is that I'm never going camping again. The widow's walk keeps watch. The first thing I smelled was salt and old varnish, coastal wood cured by a century of winters. The house at Knife Point Road wore gray shingles, and atop them, a widow's walk like a crown of bleached teeth. Off-season rates made it mine for a November week. The rental agent gave me a key and a look. Storm glass is falling. If the wind comes up after midnight, don't go on the roof. Hatch is nailed, he said. I'm an archivist, not a thrill seeker. I had come to collect minor New England folk tales before my sabbatical ended. to let my life cool into something I could touch. The widow's walk was a curiosity, nothing more. Inside, smoke-brown wainscoting, iron bed, a Franklin stove, and in the foyer, a floor tiled with porcelain shards like broken teeth. Somewhere between my first mug of tea and the radio's storm warnings, I recalled a line from a library pamphlet. The sea returns what it takes, if someone keeps watch. Superstition, I decided. Weather talk in a region that stitches storms and grief into everything. I slept to the metronome hush of tide on rock. Midnight woke me. Footsteps, a slow tread overhead, plank to plank, pausing at the corners, circling again. The rhythm was human. The hatch never opened. The steps simply kept the circumference, the way a widow keeps hope moving by watching the horizon. Hatch is nailed, I whispered. The dark kept walking. Morning made the house look ordinary. Kettle, toast, fog. On the table, a dusting of salt crystals glittered by the sugar bowl, as if the air had condensed into grit and fallen. I brushed it away and didn't write that down. Town was a postcard with its colors soaked out. Shell shops shuttered, lobster pots stacked like iron baskets. At the chandler's, an old man with a split nail sold me storm candles and bread hard as ballast. Valentine Place, is it? He said. Roof's high. Wind hits it crosswise. Sounds like walking sometimes. Sometimes, I answered. If it's regular, it ain't the wind. He tucked bread under my arm like homework. If you hear it, keep your teeth together. Don't answer. Don't go up. House like that. Hires out its station. Widow's walk don't want to be idle. What happens if it idles? He stared toward the gray harbor. Wrecks don't give up their dead as quick. Families wait longer. Waiting is the bite. Back at the house, I checked the attic ladder. The hatch was a square of painted pine crossed by an iron strap. 6 hand-forged nails driven slantwise. No give. I pressed my palm to the wood. It felt like breath through linen. That night, the steps began at 12 exactly. Heel, flat, heel. The turn. The onward pace of someone who learned that swiftness fools the eye but not the sea. I argued with it out loud. You're the wind. You're settling timbers. The steps paused. A listening silence. Then resumed. The parlor held tokens of sea work. A brass spyglass capped with green glass. A whale oil lamp with a thorn-short wick. A soft leather ledger. Portland Gale, November 1198. 1 page read. Ships listed. Captains named. In the margin, a line drawing of a woman on a roof. Skirts stiff as sails. Beside her, keep the count. On the third night, the radio died to a held breath. I lit storm candles anyway. As the first footfall landed, the window rippled. I began to count without meaning to. 12 steps around 12 again. On the 13th circuit, an extra half step. A lean as if lowering a spyglass. A smell of kelp and tar descended. My eyes ran. I stood beneath the hatch, palms flat to the damp plaster. If you need the count, I said, I can do it from here. The steps answered by circling. The nor'easter arrived the 4th day, taking the road like a mouth takes a crust. Afternoon folded into night. Town lights blinked a code I didn't know. At the chandler's dark window, a chalked placard leaned. If you keep watch, the sea keeps count. The hand was too neat to be chance. I wore my father's sweater for the storm. He wasn't a sailor, just a Great Lakes man long gone. But grief borrows any coat that fits. When the gusts hit, some part of me stood like a cold watchman. Midnight brought the full weight of rain. The house leaned into it like a boxer, and then, as steady as a clock in a brass band, footsteps. 12, 12, 13 with that quarter turn. New water rings open on the ceiling like pale ice. A warm drip struck my blanket. Sea warm. Though the room was cold, I counted footsteps and drips until, soft as a knuckle crack, the hatch nails loosened. One lifted a breath. Another sighed. The iron strap whispered in its sleep. "I won't," I said. I moved the ladder under the square. In the attic, tar-dark air, rope smell, a marlinspike, a coil of cordage, boots with one nail missing from each heel. The hatch waited like a question I would either answer correctly or not at all. My hands found the nails. They were warm. That warmth haunted me later. Warm nails mean recent touch. I pried the square. Night detonated. Rain sheeted across the widow's walk. Shore lanterns were drowned. Out on the water, pale shapes rose and fell like slow lungs. The steps resumed, now under my feet. The roof borrowed my bones. Heel, flat, heel. Corner, turn, corner. The balustrade framed black water clawed with foam. Wind salted my mouth open. "Keep the count," something said. Wind or house or ledger ink waking up. The spyglass was in my hand. I don't remember bringing it. Through its circle the ocean came near. Forms gathered out of chop. A man in a cap, a shawled woman, a boy in an oversized slicker. They held shape when I counted them. Drifted inward. Grew definite. Look away and they softened. Count and they endured. The nails at the four corners gleamed, new silver among old black iron. 4 bright studs aligned like a handprint. I set my left hand there. Heat climbed into my fingers like a secret. A man's face rose in the glass. For a raw second I thought it was my father. Fresh water has its own book. This was not it. His mouth formed "count me." I did. He held a moment longer and slipped like a gull into air. The footsteps matched my pulse. I understood then why a house needs a person instead of iron. Wood cannot keep watch. A tongue to wet the numbers, lungs to fog glass, eyes to refuse to blink. These are instruments. The hatch, left open, slammed down and latched itself. I could have gone inside. I did not. "Hire me," I said, voice small in rain. "Just for tonight." The nails warmed like coals. Something beside my ear spoke in a woman's timbre rubbed smooth by weather. There is no night that is only tonight. Morning found 2 bodies on the beach below knife point. Eelgrass braided round their ankles, faces turned up like coins polished by tongues. The storm sheared off at 9. A bright lie of rainbow arced over the harbor. I slept in my shoes at noon, woke to dusk and the fox-cold feeling of having been seen by the dark. The ledger lay open by itself. Names, November dates, a neat space waiting. I did not write. The house had tidy handwriting. At midnight I climbed again. The corner nails found my handprint. My ring finger cooled as if a measure had been taken and I'd been fitted to a role. "Widow," the wind said. Not about a husband, but about a posture. The marriage to looking. The count held through squalls. Shapes rose and steadied when numbered. What did it return? Not life, not exactly, but bodies to shore, names to ledgers, chairs to owners. The bite of waiting softened. The house purred under my feet like a cat in a gale. I left on Tuesday in wind that smelled like pennies. The agent didn't ask why I overstayed. I didn't remember taking the brass spyglass, yet my bag was heavier. In the rear view, the widow's walk made a neat black comb against the morning. The smile of something that's eaten. In other towns, in rooms with polite radiators and snow, I hear it. Heel, flat heel. I arrange stones on my windowsill, then rearrange them. I check tides for a coastline I've left. My father remains dead in one book. In this other, I return what I can by counting. If you rent the Valentich place in November, the agent will say the hatch is nailed. He isn't lying. You'll sleep beneath a ceiling flecked with pale rings and dream of pale arms rising. The radio will murmur gale. At midnight, you'll hear a measured tread that circles and never chooses your door. Do not open. Do not speak. The walk is full tonight. And yet, one night, with the power out and the ocean the only bright thing left, your hand might float toward the attic ladder. You will know, as if a bell had named you, that someone is counting, that the town will not be bitten by waiting because a stranger is circling in the rain. The sea returns what it takes, if someone keeps watch. The house is practical. It requires a listener for old words and new weather, lungs that fog glass, eyes that don't blink in salt. It will be patient. Houses are. When the next guest arrives, perhaps you, with a suitcase whose one wheel drags and a sweater that smells like a man borrowed into a sailor by grief. The balustrade will throw its neat square on the floor at noon, and a scatter of salt will glitter by the sugar bowl. You'll sweep it into your palm and taste it. I tasted it too. I am the warmth in the nails. I am the extra footfall at the corner where the spyglass waits. If you feel the count lifting in your throat, step back from the ladder. Let the wave go by. Or don't. Towns are kept or they aren't. Ledges fill, handprints warm. And the sea, as ever, speaks one language and will be answered in the same. A voice at the edge between storm and sleep. Counting softly, keeping watch, until the horizon loosens its grip. The stitch that closes. The quilt came to me folded like a book of night. Aunt Edda's will named it, plain as a recipe. To Ruth Ann, my burying quilt, done with horsehair thread. I rented a mill house on Sycamore Street in Barlow's Run, where the hills lean close and the smokestacks have been dead longer than I've been alive. The rooms smelled of coal dust and camphor. The beadboard walls were the color of old teeth. Its top was pieced from mourning clothes, black peak, faded indigo, a bruise of velvet, violets thin on calico. The underside was soft muslin that showed the seam work clear as veins. Most stitches were cotton. Here and there ran a darker gleam that bit when touched. Horsehair, coarse, wiry, softened by hands that knew how to coax. Edda had been a layer-out for Caldwell & Sons, the funeral home on Spruce. She hemmed shrouds, set collars, pinned stockings, and, when the tongue swelled, did the stitch that closes. Folks said that, like a prayer. The stitch that closes. I spread the quilt on my bed. The wind found the eaves. When the mill whistle blew midnight out of habit, I heard a sound not of wind, thread moving through cloth, a soft, deliberate writing. By morning, a new seam had appeared, tight little horsehair loops tracing a rectangle, not in the old pattern. I held my palm to it and felt a salt cold pass through me. The rectangle matched my bedroom's floor. Barlow's Run keeps its stories sealed like fruit in jars. I poured coffee at the diner mornings and shelved books at the library afternoons, where the microfilm reader purred like a loom. I took the quilt to Miss Adeline, who knew the history of every hymn and every strike. Burying quilts aren't to warm the living, she said, touching the muslin without quite touching. Sometimes they ride the coffin. Sometimes they ride a house that's had too many goodbyes. Horsehair holds a knot stiff. Undertakers used it to keep the dead from saying more than they said alive. What about the living? I asked. She glanced toward the mill beyond the river. Company feeds a town and chews it. A stitch is a stitch. That night, more rectangles bloomed, one for the parlor, accounting for the stove's iron belly and the sofa's hump. A figure 8 looped my bedposts, loose at first as if measuring. When I rose, a hair snagged my nightgown hem and bit my finger. The bead of blood tasted like a nail and a wild field. I told myself I was sleepwalking with a needle. Except I don't sleepwalk. The needle lay in a jar of buttons, quiet as seed. I folded the quilt into a trunk, latched it, set a Bible on top, and wedged a chair against the lid. At midnight, the chair tapped the trunk gently, as if someone seated there had decided to rock. At dawn, I cut the new loops. They sprang back, the ends coiling into the seam like hair in rain. By evening, the figure 8 around the posts had tightened to a patient belt, a hair-fine line gathered along my doorframe. One hair laid beside another until they read a shadow. When I stepped through for water, the thread brushed my cheek like a gnat's wing. "Stop," I said, and heard how small it sounded. Caldwell and Sons kept irregular hours, but I went anyway. Mr. Caldwell the younger met me in shirt sleeves, jacket over a chair, laborer's hands dressed in silk. "Your aunt stitched neat," he said. "We had no complaints." "Did she make this?" I showed the muslin, the horsehair. He didn't touch it. "She made many quilts. Winter is cold." "And summer?" I asked. "When Dora Pike took sick in July of 58? When the mill roof fell in 31? And the ones who crawled out could still talk?" He draped his jacket as if covering a body. "Some noises are best calmed, Miss Ruth Ann." I carried his good manners home like a flat stone on my chest. The trunk stood open. The quilt lay spread on my bed, edges kissing the floor. The figure 8 now snug. On the underside, between old seams, names had been whip-stitched. Dora Pike, Silas Ray. 3 Finn boys with the same month carved beside them. And, new and damp to the touch, Ruth Ann. The house began to close. The window sash stuck. The bedroom door leaned into its jamb like a mouth. The horsehair seam along the frame thickened from hair to thread to cord before my eyes, twisting, left over right, a craftsman's hitch. The quilt climbed my shins with a polite weight. It smelled of camphor, old roses, and the sweetish tang of a back room where water sits in metal basins. Aunt Edda taught me to baste before I could write. "Big stitches first," she'd say. "Long enough to catch, loose enough to pull." I threaded my needle not with hair but bright red cotton bitten from my dress hem, and I basted. I laddered living thread across the horsehair, bridged the closing into something that might open. The quilt bucked. The figure 8 cinched. I set a thimble between my teeth to keep my tongue forward and swore through the metal. "You won't close me." Red ginghamed the doorway. I pulled with both fists, and the house took a breath it had been denied. Cold came in, The kind from low places and waiting rooms. With it came voices, not loud but many, naming themselves the way names are whispered at wakes. The quilt heaved like a wave to drown them. I drove the seam ripper under the knot beside my name and snapped it open. The quilt slackened enough to seize. It burned my arms where the horsehair kissed, little welts rising like seeds. I salted the coal fire with lamp oil and fed the quilt whole. The smell wasn't cotton, it was hair. Old animal hair going to smoke, and in the smoke a sound like thread running through cloth. A dry, fast whisper. A whisper is a kind of hush. A hush is not silence. At dawn, I walked to the mill fence with scorched muslin knotted like a banner, red basting hung like arteries. I tacked it to the chain links with upholstery nails and a stone and let the wind do its work. By noon, the town gathered in twos and threes, hats in hand. Miss Adeline came with her thimble on a string like a saint's bone. The Caldwell deacons stood behind Mr. Caldwell as if the Lord were a client. The wind slatted the smoking cloth and showed what the stars had been. Knots at map points where accidents were dressed as weather or fate. The figure eights were bedrooms. The long bars were doors stitched quiet. In the charred corner, where my name had been, the muslin bubbled, as if a pulled thread were trying to draw a new letter. I spoke the sewn names and heard them answered, one by the living who'd kept them in their mouths with their teeth clenched for years. A woman pressed a button into my palm. "For your coat," she said, and meant for courage. "There was mercy in the stitch," Mr. Caldwell said, careful and kind. "Mercy would have opened," I answered. "This closed." I moved off Sycamore before winter, but didn't outrun inheritance. Some nights, when the radiator ticks, I wake with a single black hair laid crosswise on my lower lip, measuring. I keep a seam ripper on the nightstand and red thread wound like a vein on my wrist. Barlow's Run speaks nearer to the ground now. Names have dates again. Doors breathe in their frames. The company sign came down. The Caldwell boys sell caskets at cost. Miss Adeline stitched a new banner for the Union Hall. It's stars, true stars. They asked me for a border. I said yes, and stitched it loose, basting only easy to pull. I will not teach the town to close again. Even so, when I match blues to black, I feel the old method tug at my hand. Small, practical, persistent. Aunt Eda wasn't evil. She was hired. A town will hire silence when it hurts. If you inherit a quilt that smells of roses and rain and horses, sleep under a sheet instead. If midnight brings thread-writing names, don't answer. Or do if you want doors to open. Either way, keep your thimble close and your mouth strong. A stitch can close. Held long enough, it can also cut. The knocker at 3:03. There's a way the city smells before shift change. Hot iron, old rain, and the sugar burn of antifreeze. Our block sits under the factory's orange hum, a row of brick houses whose windows have learned to be patient. Old men at Rossie's bar still tell about the knocker-up, a man with a cane who used to tap workers awake before alarms were cheap. Long pole, walnut tip, a ledger of addresses. Tap, tap. Time to earn your bread. He died sometime in the 70s, they say. Jacket buttoned to the throat. Watch stopped. Now, decades on, the taps have come back. 3 precise raps at 3:03. moving window to window down the block like a pencil on a ruler. Those who ignore it oversleep their last morning. Those who answer say, the third knock doesn't come from outside at all. It comes from inside the glass. The first week I moved into 14B, I slept with the window cracked so the city could teach me its rhythm. At 3:03 exactly, a brisk trio shook the pane. I lay there measuring the cold draft and the way my pulse tried to match it. Down the row, windows answered, tap, 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 as if a polite storm were walking east. By dawn, Mrs. Lasky at 10A hadn't made her tea. The ambulance came quiet. The sheet did the rest of the speaking. 79, someone said, as if a number were a reason. Should have answered, the bartender muttered that night. He comes respectful. You stand up, he goes on. You believe that? I asked. I believe in men who had a job. He polished a glass until it was only fingerprints. Some jobs keep going. I bought a cheap alarm and set it for 3:02. I spread flour on the sill and leaned a dime on its edge against the glass. Poor man's tripwire. Outside the sodium lamps, snow fell like burnt paper. At 3:03 the pane ticked. The dime wobbled, then stood itself back up because something had steadied it. The flower recorded a neat comma where a cane could have kissed. I got bolder. On the second night, I stood in the dark with my hand on the latch. The knocks came, measured, traveled, arrived. I'm awake, I said like a password. A fourth sound answered, softly, distinctly, from the room with me. The triple tap repeated on the inside of the window. Not the glass, I realized, the reflection. My face did not flinch, my reflections did, eyelids narrowing a fraction before mine. As if it had heard the cue first. Then the block breathed out, and the next window took its turn. You tell yourself tricks, settling pipes, teenagers, a prank. But the city keeps a ledger in small ways. Hal, from 12C, who laughed and rolled over, was found gray in his armchair the next noon, TV talking to no one. A girl, 3 doors down, opened her blinds to say thank you and saw the third knock bloom on the inside of her frosted pane. 3 clear circles like breath had kissed it. And by Sunday, her boyfriend was driving a new car and not looking up. Miss Dara, in 16A, has the kind of voice that sits you straight. In the old times, she told me, we left coins on the sill for him. Pay a man and he's yours only in the morning. Don't pay, he's yours always. She pressed a tarnished halfpenny into my palm. Windows remember intentions. So do men. I tried money. The coin woke cold as a tooth, and at 3:03 the cane avoided it delicately, like a gentleman stepping past a puddle he could have dragged you through. After that, I stopped trying to avoid it and tried to understand it. I found, in a junk shop behind the bus station, a ledger with columns for names, shifts, notes, light sleeper, heavy drinker, newborn in house. The last entry was a blurred address that could have been mine or the one before. Below it, an inked time. 3:03. No day, no year. A habit becomes a law if it lasts long enough. The week of the boiler inspection, the city ran wrong. Clocks gained then lost minutes, and the siren by the river looped a cracked F for an hour after lunch. That was the night the knocks doubled back. They came down the row, paused, then returned the other way faster, as if something had checked its list and found it untidy. At 3:02, I unplugged my alarm, pushed my dresser against the window, and sat in the dark with a mug of coffee that had gone oily and bitter. The pane trembled. I didn't speak. 3 taps. Silence like the breath you take between names. 3 taps. Time, I whispered. To myself or him? 3 taps. From inside, the glass didn't break, it flexed. My reflection's shoulders lifted before mine, meeting a draft I didn't feel. Behind my own face, a shape assembled. A hat brim, a coat collar, the long line of a pole held, not like a weapon, but like a habit. When the cane touched the inner surface, circles of frost spidered outward. He was in the room where the reflection goes when you turn away. He had always been there, walking that narrow street behind the glass, keeping the list. Up, he said without sound, just the muscle of his jaw giving the word shape. He tipped the cane toward the factory ridge where smoke wrote its arithmetic against the night. Up. I stood because the body obeys orders given in the older grammar. The dresser scraped. The room grew sharper the way air grows hard on a winter morning when everything expects to be struck. He lifted the cane head high and set the tip once more against the reflection side of the pane, not knocking now, but pointing. The ledger on my table opened in a wind that didn't cross the floor. The blurred address resolved into my own, neat as the end of a sentence. I work nights now, not at the factory, though the whistle feels like a pocket watch in my chest. I walk the block and the block behind it, and sometimes the one along the river, and the pole I carry is not wood when you hold it in certain lights, but a length of condensed time with a walnut tip. People say we're past needing a knocker-up. People say a lot of things while the city keeps time with a bone. If you hear 3 brisk taps at 3:03, sit up. Say you're awake. He is polite, but he is thorough, and he does not skip a name twice. Lay a coin on the sill if it settles you, though he will step around it. Draw the curtains if you like. Curtains only slow the draft. And if you are the curious sort, the sort to put flour on the sill or your hand on the latch, know this. The last sound you hear will be close, neatly measured, and it will not need to cross the cold between the street and your bed. Tap, tap, tap. Enjoyed the video? Like, subscribe, ring the bell, and drop a comment. It really helps the channel grow. That's all for now. Thanks for watching and see you soon.